I thought we had one. Oh, we had one regular meeting.
All yours, Bob.
Well, nothing.
We recommend that we wrap up the department as soon as possible. We have at least 2 sessions.
Yeah. So here's a list if you want to make one of these two. Change these to capital.
Okay.
All right, welcome everybody. I'd like to call the meeting to order. It's Wednesday, February 15th, 2023. It is 6:01. I'd like to open the floor up for public comments for items not on the agenda.
Yeah, I'd like to speak on behalf of the group that I belong to. It's called the Safe Main Fish and Heritage. And the lady that heads it up named Crystal Canny, and I spoke with you. So she would be willing to present to the Board of Selectmen on behalf of Safe Main Fish and Heritage. About the possibility of the town putting an article in warrant to create a moratorium on agricultural leasing, given the latest concern about the number of leases that are being applied for in town. She'd be willing to present to the Board of Selectmen if they wanted to some point go further with that, maybe put an article in warrant. The town meeting, town vote on it. They've done that in a lot of other towns. Some towns have rejected it, and some towns have gone along with it. And, it's a particular interest to me because, like I stated at that meeting over last week, about the amount of I don't know, time goes right down. Both the number of new leases and the concentration of them right in this town because of the water quality issues. And Long Island having not clean enough water for a lot of the people that want to do leases. And anyway, she'd be willing to present to the Board of Selectmen, and they're willing to.
So I'll open it up to you guys. If you guys want to get in contact with Crystal about this, I'll call her tomorrow and get some information. All right.
I think we should.
Okay. Carol?
I think coastal waters we should, I think it's as much their purview as ours, so I think we should make sure they're available.
Was wondering, because it wasn't on the agenda, should we perhaps put this as a discussion item on our agenda next time around so that anybody who's interested in participating in the discussion would know in advance that we were talking about it?
I'm just asking the board if you're interested in me following up with this woman to make a presentation. So we're not making the presentation right now, and there's no vote or motion, so it's just a consensus.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. All right. I'll call her tomorrow. If I can't find her number, I'll make sure to call her.
I have.
All right. Anybody else have any? No problem. Anybody else have a comment? I have a comment. Yes.
Would it be possible to consider the value associated with investigating best address labeling practices as practiced by other communities in Sheboygan? The reason why I'm asking this question is because as a new EMT, as somebody who's not super familiar with the island, and as somebody who's been sent across somebody else's yard to try and find an address on a call in Google Maps in the middle of the night, if you're looking for an address, it can be very challenging. And as I'm sure you all are aware, time is of the essence when responding to calls. And there's no consistent formatting across all the different mailboxes and all the different addresses. And in scenarios where you're dealing with something that's very critical, every second of wasted time can impact an outcome. Now, nobody likes unfunded mandates, and nobody likes being told what to do by the government when it comes to signage. And that's why I'm asking if it would be reasonable to consider an investigation to see if there is some form of standardization as a community we can all agree upon to help facilitate response to emergency calls.
Aaron?
I mean, didn't we rename all the roads consistent with the 911 requirements?
A number of years ago, that was
And then
done.
it's the distance along the road that determines its address via 911. So I think we have that system in place. Maybe you don't have access to it.
At 2 in the morning, if all you've got is a address location and you're hunting that and trying to think about what you're gonna do when you get to the call, because there's a lot of prep work that goes into before the arrival, I would much rather have my mental capacity focused on what I'm going to do next than trying to interpolate the location of an address. But
But
that's,
I think we are using the 911 address system.
that's fine. but you
So
still
I
have to
guess I
find
don't
the
quite
location.
understand what is it that you need beyond that?
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
What is it that you're looking for beyond that? I
Yeah,
guess I
Steve's
don't.
gonna-
We are given, to the best of the dispatcher's ability, we are given accurate information. Our roads, private roads are challenging with long dirt roads on occasion. But what I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, what Matt is kind of insinuating or discussing is a placard, a numbered placard of identifying that particular roadway. If there's a series of homes on that particular road, there might be 3 placards. But usually they're green in other communities, Arizona and Florida, blue and white, or green and white. The standard size. Sometimes it's made into a fundraiser also for the fire department, for people to opt in to purchase the actual placard.
So you're talking about it's not a system, it's a visual
Visual aid.
representation of the road. So
But
you
it's
can-
standardized, is the point, is that not everybody gets to do their own thing.
Right, it would be a standardized method of location and the actual, what we're looking for, the actual placard
It's
itself,
number.
the number.
Because if you go down to Jenks, you've got all those mailboxes, and they all got numbers on them, but they're all at the front of Jenks Road.
Right.
So if I'm looking for one location, I could be going to like, it's
I-
you don't want to be wasting that time.
I follow you. So I think it's the ability to identify it in the field, not necessarily the system.
Correct. That system generates an accurate address, or at least the system thinks it's an accurate address.
I think what Matt started with was a request that EMT, rescue, fire be encouraged to investigate what other communities do for standard numbering marking system. I would encourage them to do so and bring back what they find when they do that investigation as to what they think the best alternative is for Shabazz.
You want to charge them to do that?
I think that's what they were asking.
I'm agnostic, if you would like, we can obviously discuss amongst ourselves who the best people are to do that, or if you guys would prefer, if there's a better process. I don't know what the best practice is, and I don't know how to find best practices, but, whatever the easiest path is for y'all, make a lot of sense to try and pursue.
I would put forth a motion that we ask fire and rescue to work with their main state resources and other resources to investigate the best numbering system alternatives and bring that recommendation from the department back to this board.
I don't think we need to do that in form of motion. We're gonna just do a formal request. With, assistance. You find that?
Yeah, I had quite a lot to do with the 911 addresses when I was working on mapping for broadband. And they're not what the state has, but I don't know if this is. Okay, so. There are all corrections to be made to that. And I think by now know what most of those are. And I would help, and possibly that would help some of the Google Maps sending them across people's lawns too. Where one's actually going to is.
The concern from an EMT point of view is also summer people who might be in rentals that don't know, excuse me, the address or the number of the house. So as someone who lives here, some rescue can say to dispatch, what is the name on the house? And we all can say, oh, yeah, we know where that house is. But often we're identifying a house not by the number of the address, but by the name on the house, which is could be a flawed system. And so really struggling with not knowing the numbers of houses or being able to see the numbers on a house, likely because there isn't one, really has been a challenge. So sometimes if the issue is the road, sometimes it's identifying the number on the house.
Be also important for per diems, eventually, to have zero familiarity with the road names. Or improve response times.
Art?
So it's likely after your research that you may come back to this body and ask us to help you implement something which probably or could include a requirement for all residences to put a number somewhere, either out on the end of their driveway, like with my house. I'm up on the hill, so mine would go out right next to North Road on a street. So it's likely to be most effective.
Correct. So
Correct.
it could be at the end of the driveway, on the mailbox at the end of the driveway, and or on the actual house.
My point is, you may be coming back with a recommendation of a style, a color, a size, and we may be asked to
Right.
make it a requirement, really.
We understand the ramifications.
Thank you.
I think it's a great idea, of course, but I was wondering if you should start by maybe just making people aware that this is a problem. And I would think a lot of people would be like, oh, okay. And if the fundraising idea sounded like, yeah, people would really jump on board to buy a sign that, for that purpose.
I've seen other departments purchase like kits for them, and then whenever there's events and so forth, they have them available to show people how important it would be. So there definitely would be some education and suggestion for people.
But I'm totally dating myself, but I remember being little and having the stickers that went on the window when there were kids and, in that household. And I would think that this could be the same type of campaign, and, people would not be objective, I wouldn't think.
Once we come back with a recommendation on location and style, I would really encourage the Board of Selectmen in their deliberations to consider the risk-reward relationship between a voluntary versus a mandatory requirement. It only helps if it's there. And the older that residents are, the more that time counts. So if you all are looking for alternatives or you don't want to make it a requirement, something that would facilitate labeling for elderly residences, of course, we have quite a few here, may be a way to navigate that trade-off if a requirement is not the ultimately desired outcome.
Thank you. All right, any other comments? All right, moving on. Town report. Town administrator.
So there's a few different things, and I did update it from the meeting that was canceled to this meeting with some additional communications that had been received. The first thing was just kind of as, for public knowledge, there are a number of committees that we have that are town committees where we need several volunteers. We have 2 that are needed on the planning board, Board of Adjustment and Appeals, Facilities Committee, Solid Waste, Shellfish, Road Plan. So just about every town-related committee that we currently have, there are volunteers that are needed. So if anybody's interested or has anybody, we would be very glad to see some additional faces on some of the committees. Any questions? Okay. The next one is, this is going back quite a few meetings to something that Bob had shared in communications. And I had followed up with EcoMaine. It was in reference to some grant and some changes that were taking place in reference to recycling that I think, if memory serves me right, that Paul had shared with you, Bob. And so I had contacted EcoMaine, which is the company that Shebay uses, and I attached the response that was received from them, just letting the town know that they're aware of this and that there may be changes coming, but at this point, there was really, didn't appear to have any additional information to be shared with us. Next thing is the Bennett Scope survey. When I wrote this up, the last information that I had was that they were here for their second time on January 24th to do the survey of Bennett Scope Road. I did receive an email from them this morning actually saying that that work has been done. They sent me an image. And so I plan to have that on the next meeting with the information of what's been shared and what the recommendation is. So, you know, any further work and decisions could be made. Cousins Island, the custom floats came, fixed the pilings on Cousins Island. They've since billed us, so that's been taken care of and done with.
I got told by, I can't remember the gentleman's name, one of the boat captains anyway, that one of the pilings that they put, one of the screws that they put in, the piling on top is cracked to the point that when they land certain times, when they land rough, the bolt kind of slides up the piling. So it's not, it's secure, it's tight together, it's just the piling slipped stuff. So I'm just curious if they did an inspection of the piling.
I was just told that the work was completely done and we were billed for it. So
Yeah.
that's I hadn't heard anything from CTC with any follow-up about it. So it's the first time I'm hearing it.
Yeah, he just told me this afternoon. He suggested maybe some kind of tightening, some kind of, I don't know what it's called, but
You can put a metal band around and tighten it up.
So the Dowdy Fowler appeal, so the last meeting that we had, there was a vote to recommend that the code enforcement officer issue a notice of violation by February 1st. I had emailed him, I believe it was the following day or within a few days of that meeting and let him know. And I checked in with him today. The notice violation did not go out by the 1st, but he did, in the communication to me, said that he had to reach out to legal and make sure that proper wording was provided on the notice of violation. So that ended up going out after the date. He's going to be here tomorrow and he'll forward it to me. And then at which point I will forward the information to the selectmen because I know it was asked to see a copy of that.
You know the date it actually wound up going out?
I don't have that date. Next thing is the Keeping Cumberland County Warm Grant. So this is something, once again, a few meetings ago, I didn't have a whole lot of information on it, but it was, Cumberland County had allocated over $1 million to the state to Cumberland County, from the ARPA funds to support and address, the rising cost of, heating costs. Every town in Cumberland County, was appropriated, up to $50,000 to, cover costs for, individuals that, qualify for heating assistance. And, so we did, sign the contract, that was approved by the selectmen to do so. We advertised it on the town website. We advertised it on shabig.org. We haven't had any applicants yet. There is, if you go on the town website, there is a kind of a summary of what it outlines and which, within what ranges based on family of 1, 2, 4, 6 of, income you have to fall in and the requirements that you need to provide. It's very easy really in the greater scheme of assistance. And so if there are people that need heating assistance, this is absolutely a program that should be utilized. The way that it works is the town covers the cost of it, and then once the bill is paid, so, if there would be heating assistance, we would contact the boatyard, tell them to go to a specific address, fill out the tank, they would bill the town would pay for it. We would send it instantly to the contact that I have, and then they would send us a check for reimbursement. So there's a little legwork in the town office part of it, but it's, it's $50,000 that is being provided by the state to help with assistance with very little requirements, so.
Mark?
We provide some assistance to the civic council in the form of general assistance, and knowing how private a lot of the individuals on the town like to be, is there a way, in your opinion, for an individual to do this discreetly through the town office?
Yes, because it's, so the applications come in through the office. I think it would be about as discreet as them working with an individual drive account, so it's not anything we would advertise, it's not ever anything that's public. But it would, their income and their name and their household amount would have to be disclosed.
I just know that it's not easy to ask for assistance for.
And, yeah, and that was something I had, when I had connected with Long Island about other things, they said that they were experiencing a similar problem, as they knew that there were plenty of residents that needed it, but the pride factor kind of played in hands. But there, the requirements are, and I attached the application in here, it's very minimum compared to what general assistance is.
Yeah.
And they make it more flexible, so I think more people can qualify for it, so.
Thank you.
Fair?
Do you think we should, find a way to notify people maybe more comprehensively, like a mailing or a postcard or something? Because not everybody's gonna read the website.
I thought about it, and, it would, I think we can print out the one page, because Kathy typed up kind of a one-page really quick summary. And I thought about, because this only runs through April 15th, and then that, there could be $2,000, there could be $50,000 that could be provided to the town. It's about the need. So I thought about doing that one page and just kind of sending it, and that cost, I think for the stamps, it would be a little over, I think the last time we did that, it was like $160, $180 for postage, so that would be minimal, but that's definitely something that we can do.
January fall. Okay, well,
Are we finished with this topic?
no,
We'll go back to the prior one.
okay.
Just very briefly, if you're printing out the description on one side, you might be able to print out the actual application on the other and save money on postage.
It's multiple pages, so.
Okay. Well, maybe if there's room on the last page or whatever, but you could just have people stick it back in the mailbox, and then they wouldn't actually have to get in front of another human being to facilitate the process. Which would be good from a confidentiality standpoint.
So do you want or go ahead and,
I guess that's my
Yeah.
recommendation is we do a
that's
mailing,
fine.
but I don't know how the rest of the board feels.
yeah, I'm fine with
That's what I'd like to do.
that. To get the word out. Okay, Bob,
On this topic still, because there any way that the new texting system would be beneficial in this case?
Yes, and I actually meant to do that.
And then if we're done, are we done with this now?
that's good. We all set with this topic, or we have?
I am, yeah.
So we're back to the Dowdy Power Appeal situation. I don't want it to go through just as routine that we have not yet seen a copy of the letter. It was late. It only got brought to attention when we brought it up that it was late. And we were told it would be done in 2 weeks. It wasn't done in 2 weeks, but we were told it would be done by the end of, I believe it was in last week. And we would get a copy. We did not receive a copy. Vika doesn't have a copy yet. There's no reason that we have to wait until the code officer comes to the island to get a copy of the letter. There are email, there are scans, there are all kinds of options. So just want to go on record expressing my frustration that it's taken so long for this to take place. It's, to me, it's a slap in the face to the Board of Appeals. And as I've said before, these boards are all volunteers, and those are my support. So I just want to get that on that.
All right, thank you.
The next thing, excuse me, is the December 23rd storm with the FEMA update. So following that, they came out and did the visit and the application that was submitted in terms of the damage. There were a good couple of weeks where it really took up a lot of my time and staff time to try to determine what was town property and what wasn't, and us not having some surveys on some of the roads made it really difficult. So we had to provide, go through a lot of the deeds and try to figure out what was in the deeds and what wasn't. And so I did provide them information, and the board was CC'd on the last communication that I had, and have not heard back from them when they were here. It was told that it could be a couple of months before any decision was made. But I think that there could be, several months before we hear anything back from it.
Any questions on that?
And then there are just some communications that I added from the last time I made the report to this meeting. So an email I received from the Land Trust about trying to set up a future meeting sometime this spring to discuss how the town and Land Trust can work together towards some conservation goals. There was an email from Maine Bond Bank about the remainder of $725,000 for broadband. It's going to be added to the spring issue. Very early process of that, but I plan to, once that ball starts rolling, I plan to have an agenda item to kind of do a full up-to-date of where the broadband committee stands, where the entire project stands, and where we stand with the funding of that.
Did they give you we'll get the 725 that we need, or?
No.
That's still.
No, it's, so typically with the way that it works is we have to go through like a multi-page application with all financials and everything. And so that was done. I did that in, during the summertime in August, and it was submitted, but because the full funds were not received, they kept our application and they automatically were gonna resubmit it. And so this was just letting them know that the bond bank approved for our application to be resubmitted versus me having to reapply for everything. I did ask that question, no guarantee. We won't know that until they know how many applicants there are, what the amount to work with and so forth, so.
Gary?
Can you refresh my memory what the issue was with, why we only ended up with a partial amount of the funds, and then weren't we rated sort of as an unfavorable rating?
Yeah, so with Maine Bond Bank, there are specific requirements and specific type of funds that municipalities seek for, to receive the money. And broadband is a very new up and coming type of a debt that municipalities are investing in, and they considered this as what they basically refer to as bad money. It wasn't a secure enough project from what they've experienced in the past, like with dredging or other things, like a new plow truck. And so they're looking in within legislature and within main bonding itself to try to change those regulations, because they're seeing that there's more than, you know, one or two municipalities that are applying for this. There's a lot of them coming down the pipe. We happen to be one of the first ones that were within that pool.
Any other questions? Art?
So it had nothing to do with the way that the bond was requested, as far as Shabig being the co-signer.
No, that had nothing to do with it. It's the type of a loan and what it was for specifically.
Thank you.
The next thing is an email that I received from the main library of geographic information. And this is something that back last, when I first started, so probably January, February, it was approved by the selectmen to do high resolution ortho imagery of Shabig. And so that's done, and they just letting us know that this week they were gonna start sending that information out. So once again, when that's received, I'll bring it in front of the board for you to view and look at it, and then I'll also pass it on to the planning board, because the planning board played a role in that.
And if you can also provide a copy to, I think it's Fuchsia now, Judy Colby George, because she could use that, the aerial photos.
For
And
the
they-
GIS viewer,
What'd you say?
for the GIS viewer.
What was the name, Carol?
So it's, you know, Judy Colby George, who's been doing the
Oh,
tax
yes,
map.
yeah.
And she's actually the one who could put it up on the web for us.
And I've been in communication with her quite a bit in the last couple of weeks, getting the tax maps finalized. So the next thing is an email that was received from CDN Mahar about our biannual landfill monitoring. That was complete, and the final copy has been emailed to me. I did email a draft copy to Carol when that came into me. And so the final has been sent to me, which I'm still figuring out what my next step is as to what I do with that information, so. And then I have received an email from Jordan Macy, who is the individual that we're now working with to complete the dredging. They seem to be confident that they would have some preliminary numbers for us to work with, and they wanted to meet this week. Then I got a follow-up email saying that they weren't quite ready. And so I had set up a meeting with him just in case, but then that fell through. And so hopefully in the next week or two, they would have more of a solid number of what they think that the cost would be for the last 11% of the dredging, and then we'll have those numbers to share and can better plan for those finances.
Is that the Army Corps guy? And so they're gonna re-estimate, because they had an estimate for what was left. So are they gonna reevaluate that estimate?
So they have to go out to bid,
Right.
and based on the information that they collect, kind of provide a new estimate, a more current estimate, and that's what they were working on, and they weren't quite ready to share that information publicly.
Any more questions?
Right now, that's all I have for the TA report. I have some things since this was typed up that came in since I've been back, which I'll add on to the next agenda item. Any questions about that before I move on? So the next thing is the bank reconciliation. So with the bank reconciliation, the big thing is right now we are 2 months behind in our bank reconciliation. I do look at the account regularly. Marjorie, who was helping our bookkeeper kind of tackle any difficulties that he faced, is back to working full time, so she's not as readily available to be able to come up every month like she used to. So I did encourage him to connect with her to try to get her to come out, and so my goal is that for the next month reconciliation, that will be cut up. But do you have any questions about that part before I move on?
About the budget reconciliation or about items within it?
Just the reconciliation or the items within it. If you don't have anything specific, I can kind of go through my notes. I mean, you have all the information that I put in here, so I can cover it, or you can ask if you.
Well, it's a pretty detailed question, but the cold patch item shows 0 current month, 0 year to date, but on this check run. there's
So
no-
I printed this on 2/9. That got printed today, so that warrant isn't showing the expenses on this.
Right, and this says cold patch came from Crooker. There was recent correspondence that said it came from the hardware store. Did we have did we have 2 purchases of cold patch?
No.
Was it Crooker or was it the hardware store?
The cold patch was purchased from, that company.
Crooker.
Because what he did is, so they had, my understanding is they bought a little supply to fix, the information, the pothole on Cousins Island. The truck went over for maintenance, and anytime it goes over for maintenance, they try to get any kind of supplies that they can without having to pay extra for barging or, so that's probably worth it too.
Well, how much longer do you perceive that Tim will need Marjorie's help? Is we working towards him just going on his own, or?
I can't answer that right now.
So I'm assuming we're paying Marjorie for her services?
We haven't paid her in a couple of months. It's been, because she's been working full time, we really haven't been utilizing her the way that we were before. We've communicated with her, but she hasn't done anything in the last couple of months where it's been.
But if she comes out,
If she comes out, we will pay her. Yeah,
and where does that show up in the budget?
that comes out, that money was allocated for her under admin part-time salaries, and so that all falls within that. And it's been, I think, 2 days. I looked at it the other day, and 2 days, $1,300 that we paid her, something like that, very minimal compared to what we expected and what we budgeted.
You have a question?
The only thing that I do want to mention on here is an ongoing discussion is in terms of treasurer's report, our legal budget. And so when I wrote this up, with the transfers that had taken place, there was a little over $3,700 in the legal budget that remained for, to be expended. The bill that is on the current warrant is at $1,100, and so this is adjusted to a little over $2,600. And so once that $2,600 expended, then I will bring each month's bill to you and recommend that, we either have a town meeting, which will cost time and money, or each individual bill, a motion would be made to pay that out of Selectmen's contingency.
Any other questions?
Any questions about any of the other reports? So that I can-
We're talking treasurer report.
Yes, that's a.
Do you have a question with that?
Just a quick, I noticed that you told us, and we already knew that, the Department 3200 solid waste, we were going to use all of our bargaining lines by now. I think we have.
Yeah.
But I think you're correct in saying and looking at, we've only expended about 57% of the department.
Yes.
And the big number, which is 5110, hauling 85,000, we've only used 55%. I'm just using that as an example. of
Yep.
The place that you could probably borrow some money to pay some borrowing
Yeah.
for the remainder of the year.
Yep, and that's, one of the things that I'm trying to do, which, the time has made it difficult, is I've been going through all of the different bills that we've received. What kind of, whether it was EcoMaine or other companies, and making sure that, it's consistent with prior years, and also that the barging that we charged, there weren't any mistakes that should have been for pavement or something like that. Which is why at this point, I mean, we have exceeded that particular line item, but like you said, the entire budget, we're only at 57%, so it's not as concerning. But I'm also trying to get a better analysis of the whole entire transfer station and the barging and what's come and gone, to have a better understanding of that.
Yeah, and I won't waste much time on it, but my follow-up is I think that the barging number is up because the facility and the economy has just mandated
The
that.
big increase that we experienced is when the cost of the fuel spiked. The barging last January increased the barging cost itself, but then when the fuel spiked, that increased each individual because they do a fuel charge too. And so that increased and made that more difficult. And now that number's gone down. And Lionel Plant said that they're not anticipating doing any kind of barge increases for the next fiscal year.
Who does the fuel charge?
With each barge, we get a fuel surcharge in addition to a barging cost. And so that adjusts based on the cost of fuel.
On top of the 15% increase that they,
Yes.
thank you.
Carol Bob.
On the solid waste, I think, since we might have, you had made some recommendations that we consider some alternative solid waste management. And so if you could tabulate the cost for this year, and so we can really look at them in detail, since you're doing it anyway, and share it with us, that would be helpful. And then the other thing, to sort of step back to the treasurer's report, what's the status of the audit?
The audit, so I talked to them a couple of weeks ago, and I had some additional documents that they needed provided. And so last I had spoken with them, or through email communications, they had received everything that they needed. And so we had received the draft, and they were just kind of plugging in. A lot of it was, this ordinance or that ordinance, or can you make sure that this language is adequate? Because they hadn't done an audit for this town before. They were kind of starting from scratch versus pulling previous years, but it should be done soon. It's definitely taken significantly longer than expected. I think, a new company, new town administrator, me having to, seek some help, has sometimes prolonged the process, but it should be done soon.
Okay.
Bob.
Just a quick question. I know there's a 10% limitation on us moving money from one budget to another. Is that from one department to another, or is that within departments?
Within that department.
So we can only move,
Entire department.
so we can move as much as we want to within a department, but only 10% from another department into it? Or can we only move 10% from something in that department to barging in that same
If you
department?
look at the town warrant, you vote on admin, and I'm just gonna use an example here. So administrative, 160,000, solid waste, 200,000. And so that number is where you've got that 10% flexibility in that full number. The breakdown is just more for, I think, knowledge base to really get a better idea of how all those numbers come from.
So to follow that example, if we wanted to move money from administration to solid waste, we could only move 10%.
Or go over 10% within that department, yeah.
Say the solid waste is 200,000, we can go up to 220. Oh,
So
that
with
one.
with the legal department, for example, our legal department is one department legal expense. It was appropriated and voted at town meeting that it was $10,000. We cannot exceed legally over $11,000 for that department
Yeah.
because, and that's, does that make sense?
I think so, yeah.
Jen, sorry.
No problem. Under the, harbor master shellfish, do you have a guesstimate on how many shellfish licenses we've sold so far this year? Ballparkish.
5.
Okay.
They're usually slow this time of year. They pick up when spring and summer picks up and they become more. The people that come in this time of year are like commercial guys or people that want the very first one.
Gotcha.
Otherwise, it's pretty slow.
And then the other question I had, as far as the code enforcement officers report, I'm concerned about the work on Hope Island. And just that he's going to, or he's supposed to be, you know, kind of in touch with them as far as, because they're talking about the blasting and giving us notice. And I just want to make sure that he's up to snuff on that and making sure that he's got a handle on that, because that would be very shocking for people who start blowing things up on Hope Island.
That was a follow-up on that. This time of year, how would our code enforcement officer get to Hope Island if he needed to? Would we hire a water taxi or how would that work?
We're trying to figure that out right now, and him and I have had a couple of communications, and then Jackie, our assessor, also is interested, so we've talked about the 3 of us making a trip out there, but not having a boat makes it difficult, and so we haven't discussed it to the point where we've tried coordinating to figure out, you know, are we gonna hire water taxi and spend that or whatnot, but
Thanks.
I would suggest that we include 2 select board members on that boat trip when it happens. Whatever two are available, I'm willing to go if anybody is. I think we just need to know more. We need to remain aware of what's going on out there. It's hard to know when we can't see it.
Sure.
And have we had any correspondence from the Maine DEP about Hope Island, or has Jim?
I know that Jim has had, I communicated with him once about the fact that, a number of Shabig residents had called DEP on Hope Island, and DEP was in communication with him and asked him to provide some information about permitting and what they've received.
Could you ask him to provide that to the board, just their request and his responses, just so
Sure.
we're up to speed? And is there any kind of file in the office on Hope Island at this?
There's, I think, 2 full drawers, filing drawers on Hope Island. So there's a lot of information, and then he's got a file going with everything that's coming. What they've been doing is they've been sending checks to the town without the permit, and so he's got like 3 checks that are sitting right now where he's had to communicate with him to send a permit so he can look at that, because I won't deposit anything unless I have a permit number assigned to it. So I know he's been communicated with they have like a construction manager that's doing it, so.
And didn't you have to scan the historical file to provide to their attorney?
There wasn't a full file, there was a couple of first, I think, building permit applications that they wanted, or some changes when the company first bought it, because there was some discussion of some families of Cacalitas that wanted to know what was going on, and so they're the ones that were requesting the information through somebody.
So would that correspondence with the DEP be in the file in the office, or does Jim just have that?
Most likely that would just be in communications through email.
Just to clarify, when you said there's 2 file drawers of information on Hope Island, is that historical or is that current permit. So is that current since the new acquisition?
No, not current, not current.
Is
That's
there a
just
file on the current
everything.
activities? Is my
Yes.
question. There is a file there on the current activity.
He's had information about Hope Island. I don't know as far as how accurate or up to date, what's in it, what isn't in it, because I don't look at it regular, you know, that's not something that I go through, but I know that he's been keeping track of it.
Would the board be interested in asking Jim for a memo or a breakdown on what's going on over there?
Yeah.
Or maybe,
He included a write-up in his report. It was very brief. I'm less interested in the descriptive letter and more interested in seeing the actual document. But I need to go to the office to see that. I'm hoping that the document.
He's gonna be in tomorrow, so I can ask him to just gather that so that it's available, because I would, I mean, I don't know what it's for.
all right, the board?
Yeah, I think it would be valuable to get updated on what's going on over there. There seems to be some increased activity.
So do you want a memo from him, or do you want to meet up at the office tomorrow? With him, or?
I can't tomorrow.
I think we could, tomorrow, he can get the file up to date so that
I'd
everybody,
be more comfortable asking him to do that, because he's probably got.
and we can stop in and look at it.
And do you have specific, if you have specific questions that you want to ask him, please send him an email.
Yeah.
And then
And
he can
CC
include
me.
that, he can include that in his information.
Yeah.
All right, thank you. All right, anything else? Any other questions for the CA? I have one. Does the Public Works have a plan for Roy Hill? The side of the Roy Hill is pretty chewed up from the last rainstorm that we had.
They're aware of it. When I talked to Chuck, he was really worried about and concerned about it, and he said he needs to get to it. That's the detail of what I can tell you at this point. I don't know when, what, and how.
Okay. All right. So as long as it's on the radar.
Yes.
All right. Any other questions? All right, moving on, regular business, 23-007, to consider fire department request to purchase temporary structure for backup ambulance and take any necessary action. So I know this has been on the docket 3 times, we've even got a quote, a long time ago for, I can't remember what the quote was for. It was one of those tents like you have at your house, Bob. Right now, they're requesting for something similar like that. So, any comments?
That quote may be updated because that's actually what I paid. That quote is actually a copy of what I got invoiced. And I would like to make a motion, we can finish talking about it. So we allocate $1,000 for them to do that. I think we'll get at least 5 years out of that cart barn. And I think by then, we hope to have a public safety building in place that will house both ambulances.
Allocate how much?
1,000.
The quote is for like,
Well, you paid 8,000 for yours.
I'm sorry. Round up. I paid 8,000 for mine, round up 1,000. I was rounding up a couple hundred. I was thinking 800, so 8,000. 9,000 for, so that they are ready for a price increase. It's increased. To allow them to spend up to $9,000.
From where?
What he mentioned in their money for it.
ARPA,
Oh, from ARPA, yes.
that's what the request is.
That was a pretty disjointed motion. And has to be-
Could you repeat that? You want to make a motion?
I would make a motion that we allocate $9,000 from the ARPA fund for the tarp barn as described for the second ambulance.
You call it a cart barn?
Tarp
Tarp.
barn.
Shelter Logic Building.
All right, is there a second? Second, Karen. All right, discussion?
I would just suggest we have it up to $9,000.
Thank you.
Do
Agreed.
Any other comments? Good.
I'd like to hear more about why we need a second ambulance. I've heard, a few things, but not anything convincing as far as I'm concerned. And also, I think it's important to get an up-to-date quote for the simple fact that it may be more than $9,000 right now. We don't know.
You have a comment?
I spoke to, Ralph about this, and I was very open and vocal with them, but I just want to publicly express that, with the work that, the facilities committee is trying to do to make some small upgrades to the, current, building, that I do not support this particular expense to come out of the ARPA funds, because I think that's a huge chunk for that, and that's what Ralph knows that, and I just wanted to make sure that, you are aware of that as well.
So currently, we don't have any monies anywhere to try to get this self-lodging. I think if we do this investment, once we do have the new facility, we can sell shelters in good working order. So I'll leave it up to you guys. Do you want to wait for March? Okay. All right. Yeah.
Yeah, I have two questions. One is that a legitimate expense under the ARPA rules?
The MMA legal said that it is most likely something that would be covered.
The other is that, probably, at least some of you remember, this has gone around before. We voted for and then against.
Yeah.
And I guess I'm wondering what's changed. Make it down more of it, advisable, or not advisable, whatever. Anyways, it was decided not to be advisable before.
Well, one of the things is we have ARPA fund now. It's not coming out of our budget. So that's one of the biggest things, unless there's somebody else that wants to add to that on the board. All right. Sure.
Yeah, I do kind of want to speak in favor of the motion. I guess it's not a motion. Speak in favor of the proposal. In April of 2019, this came before the board, I said before. And the proposal then, the quote then was a new bay on the side. And that quote was $186,000. So this represents a, considerable compromise on the fire rescue's part to try and accommodate, pressures on the capital plan at the time that we had. So I encourage you to support the notion, unless we're going to sell the second ambulance. And we had the opportunity to do that when we bought the first one, was decided by the board at that time that it was important to keep. But we couldn't raise the funds to house it. So I think we're still working on that single project. So I would speak in favor of it, now that you have some money to work with, and a much more reasonable proposal in terms of cost. Either get rid of the ambulance or get it uncovered.
I've heard from different members of Fire and Rescue of several times, not that many, but several times when we had a call for a rescue when our primary ambulance was out. And our population is up, our summer activity is up, our average age is up. And in the summer, we have a lot of kids running around on bicycles. I think it's important that we take advantage of that used piece of equipment and keep it. And then that it's important that we preserve it and take care of it as best we can. I think it's important to remember that there are supplies on that ambulance that are going to last longer and be in better condition if the ambulance is kept out of the elements. And it would be better if it was in a temperature controlled building. I don't think we have that option at this point in time. I think it's one more reason we need to move forward as quickly as we can on the new public safety building. Knowing that we're definitely early days on that, and I think the Tart Barn is a good compromise and a good investment in the community.
As an EMT, I can think back to times prior to my training clearly when two ambulances would have been needed. And since I've been an EMT, there has been a time when two have been called. And I really can see the need for it and the importance of it. Preserving it as an option on this island, you just don't realize how much you need it until that moment. So I really can see the value of making sure the second ambulance is safe and available and ready to be called upon in time of need. Because we all think about the worst case scenario. Am I correct that a mass casualty is 2 people because that exceeds the capacity of your rescue? So that's what we're thinking about, is that if we have an ambulance call with 2 people, technically that's a mass casualty. So while you could fit 2 people in the ambulance, there's not a lot of help for those people that can be fit in there. So again, thank you very much for considering it, but I think it should be, I just think it needs to happen. Thank you. Oh, you know, I just want to say, good, robust support for people who are working robustly for rescue is, I think, important. Thanks.
Any other comments? Yes.
I understand how tight the budget is, and it's very clear that this board is working very hard to make sure that each dollar that goes out the door is spent appropriately. As a taxpayer, I appreciate that deeply. I am a risk manager by training, and there's different types of risks. There's risks that you occur every day, the normal 911 call. And then there's edge cases where the chances are we're going to need 2 ambulances. We may go over a year before we need them. But let's think for a second about, should that risk occur, what that would actually functionally look like. That ambulance represents a significant investment by our community. It's not a it's not a $1 investment. It's fully depreciated. There's not a lot of resale market for it. So it's a captive asset in a way. And if you're approaching this from a fiscal conservatism, from a position of fiscal conservatism, the way to make sure that the original investment lasts as long as you possibly can is to take care of the investment. And we all know that the salt air here destroys metal. Corrosion happens when things get wet. I'm sure if you watch the news, you're aware of what happens to tires when they're left out in the sunlight. It is a significant expense to take $8,000 out of a budget, but in the event that we have a situation where we have to run 2 calls at once, I'm probably one of the larger, more physically capable members on the squad. Jeremy's on there as well. But the majority of our new EMTs are a little bit older than I am, and they don't lift things as well as I do. And if that edge case takes place in the middle of a snowstorm, you want the people responding at 2 in the morning to be focused on getting the supplies that they need to respond and getting up and out the door to the call. You do not want them thinking about shoveling snow. Did I get all the snow off the windshield? Is there ice on the ground? We had a situation where an EMT actually slipped and fell over in Cousins, and she's still recovering from that. There is it is a low probability event, but should it occur, it is a high cost event. And I would encourage the board to consider the idea that maybe $8,000 gets you out of having to set aside a significant portion of capital during a future capital cycle to replace the second ambulance.
And I just would want to echo what everybody in favor said and just think about, there are the ambulances down at the Stone Pier, the stretcher has gone off on the boat so that we can transfer to Yarmouth Rescue and another call comes in. And, and there's snow and you need to like get that ambulance ready to go and, I really, this is so important to have that ambulance be
Ready to go.
ready to go and not ice cold.
Yes, Mark?
If this motion passes, the money will come out of the ARPA fund. And would that leave a balance of around $27,000 if this passes? And was the concern from the facilities committee or part of the facilities committee that that money was being asked to come out of this fund? Was that the biggest concern?
For this expense.
Thank you. And then if I could ask a couple of my typical boring practical questions. If we purchase this big tarp building, would the fire department be assembling it?
I think so. Don't know the answer to that, to be honest with you, but I believe that it's
It's a fairly big structure, so, and quickly, I'll be quick, Bob. I went up there to look where the unit's parked now. And it's parked a little bit on the pavement, a little bit on the dirt, doesn't matter. Would the structure be placed similar to where the vehicles placed now? And so we probably won't have too many big snowstorms that appears anymore, but if there were a big snowstorm, there would be some snow that would slide between the building and the existing building, logistically possibly needing to be removed.
Yeah, snowblower.
Okay. And then my last boring question, if I may. I don't know how the front of those zip up. And are they easy to zip up and access?
So two things. One, to answer your question, yes. And you can either, two people can raise the entire double door assembly at the same time.
Okay.
So you can raise the whole thing at one fell swoop. One person can raise one half of it and then raise the other half in twice that much time.
Okay.
The way this one is laid out, it has a kit that you install after you've built the tent that raises the doors, and it has another kit that is a pulley that you mount up top that raises the zippers. It's improved dramatically from when I helped our son build the one that's got the old boat in it. To answer the question about assembly, if Bob and Nancy can build one, I'm pretty sure the fire department can.
No, I wasn't doubting anyone. I was just making sure that
Yeah.
we would have a plan if the.
But if Bob and Nancy do it, I would suggest we sell tickets, because it's pretty amusing.
And my only point of asking about the access of the zippered front is efficiency of responding. Thank you.
I just had a question about, if there was a need for the second ambulance right now, is it set up so that you guys could jump and go? Does it have everything that you need in it?
Protocol would be to take our go bags from the main ambulance, and then we have an extra stretcher at the fire station. We can't leave any medicines and things in that ambulance because it's not temperature controlled. So we would take our go bags from the existing ambulance and
So
the stretcher from the fire department.
So the shelter lodge building will help as far as just keeping it undercover, but it won't help you as far as keeping it stocked with.
Correct, yeah, no heat, without go back of heat in a permanent building, you could not keep that vehicle stocked.
Gotcha.
There's thousands of dollars of medicine that needs to be under temperature control.
So we'd still be short of our goal of having a real ambulance ready to go, but it's a lot closer than we are now.
Yeah, there's some, from the fire department side too, there's some definite benefits to having an additional vehicle too. That's where I believe a lot of the value of that vehicle, since we already own that vehicle. If there was ever a large major house fire, there'll be a lot of shuttling of personnel, even from other islands, and having an additional vehicle that's kind of stripped down, ready to go to put people in it would be very effective in transporting firefighters to a fire. So that would be-
I know that it's also been spoken of using it for, a hearse, because it's a more dignified way to carry somebody instead of in the back of a pickup truck. for instance.
Probably we would steer away from that aspect. It does not have an auto lift, and we're trying to prevent, it's definitely a second call ambulance, and the fact that we wouldn't want to have a staff person get hurt in lifting and alive or a passed away person, so we would prefer not to use it if it's possible, but the auto lift is a really key element if you're ever trying to get someone in that.
All right. Here, yes, yeah.
One more small question. So within the fire department's budget, there isn't any $9,000 just sitting there that can be used.
That's what I know.
I did recommend to Ralph that they apply for recompense grant because they just recently became a nonprofit, and in discussion with him, I did mention to him that building maintenance annually allocates $4,000. From my perspective, I think, you know, when fire department saw that there were ARPA funds, it was a quick way to utilize that money. So I think there are other options. It's just that the effort going into seeking those options wasn't as readily available as these funds.
There's a motion on the table. There's a second. All in favor? All against? And
Thank you for your consideration. Any questions?
all right, moving on. 23-008, discuss public safety building electrical upgrade and take any necessary action. All right. So this has been brought up a few times. So we talked about putting, a little confusing, sorry. So broadband is looking to attach their whatever broadband, whatever you want to call it, to broadband. So either a shed or telephone poles or something like that. They're material.
Central office is a magic word, but.
Central office. Thank you.
Brother Brad.
There it is. That sounds a little more professional. Anyway, so the discussion was to either, we wanted to, when we first started looking at this, we wanted to upgrade the town hall. Either do some kind of change in there to either put another bay or do something like that. We had a couple electricians kind of look at it and go, you know, you're maxed out with what we have there. So the recommendation was to go to 400 amps, which would give us a little more flexibility in what we do there. ARPA funds came available. The board asked the facility committee to look at it again. So it's kind of, we need the board to guide us, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, guide the facility committee as far as how you want to proceed with this. We don't have, so we want to put the broadband there, and it makes sense to connect it to the generator, the existing generator that we have for the town hall. We know that we probably won't be able to do the heat pump with the current electrical that we have now. We're looking at leaning toward upgrading it to 400 amps. I don't know, I can't remember the whole discussion. Which best is here. Yeah.
I've been working on the heat pumps. I'm waiting for the architect or for the facilities committee to send me information on the proposed layout that they would be changing to, so that I could then share that with people to get quotes, so that we could then go look for grants for the heat pumps. Can't go get quotes on heat pumps without knowing what the building looks like now, or better yet, what it's going to look like after these modifications short term. Best guess, we need to upgrade the service for heat pumps, but we don't know that until we do the actual work.
Yeah.
I don't know what the amperage requirement is for what is being considered for the broadband hookup. I do know I'm running 2 heat pumps in my new house off of a 200 amp service, but I don't have fire trucks in my new house. And I do have insulation in my new house, so two big differences compared to the public safety building.
That's the other thing, we have to have Port City come over and look
They were
over
here
the
today.
facility.
Oh,
I
good.
didn't
So we
hear
had Port City came out today, and Beth and I met with them, and they've been out a number of times, but they came out today because of the new, change of trying to figure out how we can update the current building to get us to sustain it for the next, 5 to 7 years, to get us through the next couple of years. And so they did a walkthrough, and they specifically looked at, having known this trip was coming, what they did is they provided with the layout of the current building and a very rough draft of what the town needs now that they know that the public safety building is going to be moving to a completely different location. And they provided their, rough estimate on what the most cost efficient thing was. So they looked at that information and then did a whole walkthrough of the building to determine, if we knock out going into the Ross room, where that's relatively going to be and so forth. And through that discussion, talked about how in this process, with whatever this process is, at the same time, it would make sense if broadband is needed to move them onto that facility, upgrade to 400 amp, because it's an expense that will not be happening, in 5 to 7 years, and how all of that work out. And so they took that information back after they're doing their walkthrough, and he said to give them about 2 weeks, and they will have the design, rough design of the new adjustments based on these conversations. And then they will provide us something, and because they know that we need to provide that to whoever could be giving us a quote about doing the work, sending it to, and they also are aware of the August deadline for grant through efficiency main, so.
So that being the case, I'm sorry, go ahead. You guys have questions.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, that being the case, I would recommend that we hold off on a discussion about upgrading to 400 until we get this done. It's a couple weeks out. Broadband doesn't need to be hooked up to the 400 amp in the next imminent couple of weeks. Yeah, and nor do the heat pumps, because we haven't actually applied for them yet. So I would suggest we wait until we see the architect's drawings and cost estimates, come up with a plan, and then once we have that information, talk about the electric.
Sounds good. I'll refresh my memory I'll talk to Ben about it, I can't remember, it's been so long since the meeting, so. Carol?
So can we do we know what the cost is to upgrade to 400 amps?
That, I can pinpoint the estimate, but it was like between 6 and 15,000.
So, I mean, it seems like we might as well get that nailed down unless there's some other piece of information that's required in order to get an accurate estimate. And it may be that we'd have to look at the grant, but the municipal grants on energy upgrades, we might be able to include it as part of that. I don't know. Has anybody looked at that?
I've not asked that question, that is a great
But
question.
the other thing I did hear in a different project is that, that program is pretty competitive. People are really going after the money, so we don't want to wait till the last minute to apply because we might not, have it. But I think we should evaluate whether or not we could even include that cost in the grant application.
So the rough estimate was 6 to 15 for the upgrade?
Yes.
I'll call efficiency range tomorrow.
So the electric, so from what I remember, because I can't find my paperwork on that, but last I remember was basically the electrical was going to be 6 to 8. And it all depended if the town crew was doing the digging, or I was doing with other private.
Port City also have, individuals that they hire to do electrical work and stuff like that. So they did say when it comes closer to those discussions, that they could recruit the individuals that they use, which I think could just prolong the process than us waiting for some people that, are very booked out here, so.
I want to speak, but I think Mike.
Not to say that the broadcast committee has a position on this. We think that we don't need it done tomorrow, but what will be really good sooner rather than later is a commitment to do it. So that for our planning purposes, so we're not planning to buy a generator
and structure the pad that the stuff sits on, or whatever it is, be big enough for a generator, things like that. So the decision, there's more time pressure on the decision, on actual doing. Okay, first. The other thing is that, as far as we're concerned, it seems to me that it's almost no brainer to upgrade the electric, because whatever is done with that building, even if tomorrow, if we have a new firehouse tomorrow, fire department moves out. As soon as you start thinking about putting offices in those other spaces, that part can change the heat, right? You won't want light, you won't want outlets. So, and also electrical work is the kind of thing like that, just a service. Doesn't depend on other jobs. It's not gonna be cheaper if you do it in conjunction with something else. It's just an independent thing by itself. But we'll bound in and maybe upgrade it off, I don't know. Something is wrong there. And the service, that's it. So it doesn't, it's not like it should be part of the overall plan, unless there's some question about the location of boundaries. And so that's where we are. I guess you all know why we want to do this. Is that, I think that is given. We want to run down.
I think we understand why broadband is doing it. We know that. And we've already been on record that we support that.
Okay, fair.
Can I just quick comment, the one other thing in discussing with Michael a number of times, but then talking to Port City today is the equipment to do some of these upgrades is on an extreme back order, which I think, even if the board were to agree today or next week, it could be many, many months down the road before the product is available. And the other thing that Michael and I had a brief discussion about that I believe we need to go forth in front of the broadband committee and then back to the selectmen is broadband overall project. There's money allocated for a generator to hook up that system. If it moves onto town property and gets hooked up to the existing, that savings of in that budget is dropped down, which could potentially is where the money could come out of to upgrade, the facility and that particular system, because it will be benefiting. So I think there's
Not the whole.
not, yes, not, but but I think there's room and place to have money be pulled for the upgrade rather than, having to think about how in the current budget that cost would be fully needed to be funded for, so.
I think
I'll be very quick. Speak is absolutely right. Middle of April at best, is what I've been told with my customers' request for 400 amp service for the outside equipment to even show up. So there's a bad supply chain problem. The other thing is, there's no doubt that service needs to be upgraded, but I just want to, if we get ready to do it as a community, I just want to make sure that the building facilities committee and architects looks at the existing building and says, yes, we're going to remodel this building, but no, probably this wall won't change where the new meters come in, because the new meter boxes are humongous.
And that's what the whole point of their trip today was, to look at the building, the existing town office building, and see where the walls are and how could they be, what changes could be made that are going to be efficient with whatever the future changes are, but also cohesive with potential, electrical upgrade and knowing that, the funds are limited.
And also, I would get creative when we get ready to actually do the underground wire and conduit, so that we don't completely dig up that parking lot unnecessarily, make a big bed patched in trench. People have to drive over, walk over until we get that thing fixed, because at some point, we're gonna have to, reskin that parking lot probably in the future to keep it from completely coming apart. And when you dig through pavement, as you know, patching it in is not the best.
There's a pole, just near where the bear is. That I would cover up. That's right through there to the fairground.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we're talking about being down in that area too. So we're going over on the property.
Good, so let's table this till the next meeting, contingent if we get the information from Port City.
And I'll talk to efficiency manager.
It might be a couple more, because so the facilities committee was charged to bring this at the beginning of March. Depending on what we get from Port City, it might be a little bit delayed, but I'll keep, in touch with Bob, and then once we have that information gathered, we'll bring it back to the board.
So we can follow from one. All right. Any other questions on this? All right, moving on. 23-009 to discuss potential town land available for use for affordable housing and take any necessary action. I'll hand this off to Bob.
Okay, so to be really clear, I asked as a select board member if we could have this on the agenda, but I would say I'm speaking as a member of the SECA board more than speaking as a select board at this point. I don't think I have any conflict of interest. I have no financial gain from anything happening at SECA now or in the future. I'm not getting paid for anything I do there, nor will I ever get paid for anything I do there. I get expenses reimbursed on occasion when I pay the annual registration fee for $35 or whatever. But I don't think I have a conflict of interest. I would ask if anybody on the board thinks I have a conflict of interest here. Okay. So I printed out 10 copies of something that might help. So if you guys can share, then you guys can share. You guys can share. You get one. You guys share. Okay, I've got one. So. So the general situation with SECA is that we're currently working toward a project proposal with Maine Housing to put up 4 residential units on 2 pieces of land, one of which is in the process of being donated to us and one of which the town voted to give to SECA some 15 years ago. This does not have anything to do with that. The next phase of work, or perhaps we'll call it the 3rd phase of work that SECA is strategizing on, is trying to make it easier for people, year-round people, to build a home or own a home ownership specifically projects on the island in the town of Cheviot. And one way to do that would be to utilize town land that is not currently on the tax rolls in such a way. If you think about building a house out here, there's the cost of land, which is skyrocketed dramatically. There's the cost of construction, which is higher on the island than it is on the mainland. And then there's the cost of drilling a well and septic and all that kind of thing. So anything you can do to any one of those factors to pull the cost down increases the chance of a young couple or a young family being able to build and own a home on the island. There are many legal ways to ensure that such programs create homes that are legally bound to stay in the affordable pool for a 40-year period or a 100-year period. There are different ways to deed restrict property and that kind of thing. And we have talked with people from Maine Housing, Genesis, and also Habitat for Humanity about different programs that might be out there to help people build such homes. There are also programs and services that are available to help with everything from the selection process to the review of any income documents that need to be presented so that neighbors aren't looking at the financials of other neighbors. The last time we did this, we had a nonprofit organization that works in Maine on affordable housing, look at the application so that SECA board members were not looking at the applications of people who applied. So that's all background information. There are two maps here, and the first one that you're looking at, I believe, has two little green sort of triangular boxes on it, and it shows in blue the current property that the town owns. And there's a red line in there that's just an estimated red line dividing that property into about 7 acres per blue parcel. The lower parcel is committed to conservation and was committed so, I believe, when the land was donated to the town. The upper parcel, as I understand it, was described by the donors as them wanting it to be used for affordable housing, but we've not found a way to do that to date. Back when SECA was working with Maine Housing to build something that eventually became the Schoolhouse Road pair of homes, the duplex there, the first thing we looked at was that upper 7 acres. And we knew it was a challenge in terms of getting a road in there, but we thought that was doable. But we ran into some objections, and instead of trying to fight through those objections, we looked at another piece of town land that the town eventually voted to give to SECA to use for that, what became that duplex project. So that 7 acres is still out there. And the second sheet of paper, and again, these lines, the red and orange lines are just estimates that I drew in there. Or I should go back and say, on that first page, the blue line is roughly 450 feet, which describes one potential access point for getting into that parcel that would require negotiating with a private landowner who owns all that land in green, which is in forest protection. So one approach would be to negotiate with that landowner to allow use of the upper part of his road, their road, to get to an affordable housing chunk, the upper Curate chunk. There are other negotiations, but in some fashion, somebody would have to grant access, some kind of easement to get in there. And the measurement on the second piece of paper, so the second piece of paper shows basically the town land that the current town office and public safety building sits on. And that's on the right side of the page. And then on the left side of the page, in blue, is land that's been in the town's ownership for a long time. And then outlined in blue to the left of it, there are 3 long parcels, starting with a very long skinny one, and then a medium one, and then a larger one. So the town has owned the blue to the right of the skinny one and the 2 parcels to the left of the skinny one for a long time. But recently the town negotiated with the Grinnell family, obtained that skinny parcel, and thereby made that one big chunk of land. So the big chunk of land that the town now owns, that is comprised by the blue outline on the left of Division Point Road, and then the 1.5 acres on the right side of Division Point Road. That's a total of about 16 acres that the town owns there. The 2 green triangles are about 200 feet. So that just gives you a sense of the depth of that parcel that's on the right side of Division Point Road. The red outline on the larger parcel that crosses the blue, crosses the skinny one, that is approximately 5 acres. And that's just a wild guess as to what the public safety, the new public safety facility that's being contemplated might take up. If you look at the footprint of the building and the parking and all that kind of thing. And it might want to be bigger, and it might want to be a parking area for remote parking of visitors or contractor vehicles or something like that. But just to scale it, that's approximately 5 acres in that little carve out. The across North Road with frontage on Roy Hill Road is another little parcel. So that orange outline encloses a blue square. That's kind of the back 1/4 or 1/5 of the land that the public safety building now sits on. And then that little triangle that's in green, that's contained within that orange trapezoid, that little triangle is town-owned land as well, that's just been sitting there forever. Probably most of us don't realize it's there, but it's probably a tax acquired property, if you look at the history of it. So what SECA is asking, specifically the build committee of SECA is asking is, would the select board give SECA permission to explore the feasibility of any sort of home ownership or other affordable housing projects on any of these parts of land? And the parts in question on that second page, as an example, that 1.7 that's outlined in orange, a single family home could be built there today. After July 1, 2023, a single family home or two single family homes or a single family home plus an ADU could be built there under the provisions of LD 2003 that got passed last year. So that would be one thing to explore. The second thing to explore would be the 1.5 acres that's on the north side of Division Point Road. Again, 1.5 is big enough for a house right now, big enough for two residences after July 1. And then lastly, the big blue parcel on that second page, the big blue outlined parcel, the downhill part of it, the part of it that is closest to Bluff Head Road, closest to Division Point, to go in and explore there to see how wet the land is, whether it's buildable, whether it's easily buildable, or very difficult to build. And then lastly, going back to the Curate property, to be able to walk in there, look around, maybe have a soils person look at that, do septic perk test, that kind of thing. So 1, 2, 3, 4 studies. And the cost of the studies, whether it was surveying cost, soils test, septic perk, that kind of thing, any kind of legal inquiries, that would all be borne by SECA with money that SECA has or money that SECA would raise. We do have money available now, but we probably would go out looking for grants to help with it as well. But would the select board be okay with SECA investigating those parcels in that fashion, with the goal being SECA to come back sometime late spring or sometime during the summer with any sort of proposals that might be appropriate based on what they learned by doing the exploration? Yep.
I vaguely remember, wasn't there a warrant on the last town meeting allowing SECA to investigate town property?
No. There was a warrant article that went to town meeting, different piece of land in that similar area to appropriate to affordable housing, but it did not get passed.
Well, it didn't even, it got yanked.
It got withdrawn.
Yes. Withdraw's a better word. than yes. That was specifically 3 parcels of land on the the southeast corner of Roy Hill and South Road that had been suggested by the select board earlier as a potential affordable housing build site. But once we dug into the legalities of it, it was not grandfathered. Any one of the small parcels would be grandfathered, but the 3 of them combined would not be grandfathered because when you combine them, they become a lot of legal record as of the date you combine them. So that's why I got withdrawn.
I don't remember there being a specific, I might be wrong, I don't remember there was a specific address or a specific location.
Yeah, it was.
Roy Hill and North Road.
Sorry, North, Roy Hill, North.
Okay. Carol,
It's not really about this proposal, but it's more about the process, because, I mean, is it appropriate for us to take action on something that's just being introduced tonight? And shouldn't we, I mean, this wasn't in the public packet, right? So, I mean, I think, it's not a comment at all. I think this is worth considering. I just feel like process-wise, and there's the process guys sitting over there, but like, we maybe should, make a decision at the next meeting, but, maybe it's not an expenditure or anything, so it's, maybe I'm out of line. And then the other comment I have is, I understand SECA's interest in these parcels, I do think sort of to kind of, I think it's a question that's gonna come up. I think it would be helpful to ask Judy Colby George to put together a map of town-owned property. Because she can do that from the tax information pretty easily. I don't think it's a big expense. And because I think we need to put it in the context of, someone's gonna ask, well, what are the other parcels? And I can't tell you today what they are, but I just think we should have that inventory available to us. And some of them have easements on them and other restrictions, but that way, we can sort of perhaps justify where these are appropriate parcels. I don't know, that's a separate thing, but that's kind of my thing.
I'm also not opposed to having this research done at some point, but I do agree with Carol's comment that at least this wasn't made clear that it was going to be talked about tonight for anyone who may be interested in hearing about it or consuming the conversation or information. So it probably would be a good move for this board if we intend to act on this at the next meeting with more thorough advertising. Any other comments?
Yeah, I think it's perfectly appropriate. I knew we were gonna talk about it, and it occurred to me a couple days ago, I really ought to do more than just lip service. That's when I sat down and started doing up maps, and then realized these aren't in the packet. So I think it's a great idea to talk about it next time.
All right, does the board want any other information from Bob or from Sika on this for the next meeting? Yes, Carol?
I don't know what the mechanism is, Vika could answer it. I mean, I could do it, but I'd rather have Judy do it. I think if we could have a map of town-owned property, town-owned parcels for the entire island, it would be helpful to have that in front of us for the same meeting.
I can pull up in our Trio system town-owned land. We have ways to gather that data from our system.
Well, she has all the tax information, so all I was really asking is that maybe she generate a map. I don't think it would cost a lot. You could ask her. I don't think she'd even charge us, frankly.
I'll ask her. If it's a cost, then I'd probably have to think about where we could take that from.
Okay.
The GIS viewer, if I'm not mistaken, already has a category for town-owned land, I believe, but it's not accurate, which was part of the surprise that I stumbled across finding that little triangle, for example. So I believe blue, anything in blue on the map is town-owned land, but not all town-owned land is colored blue. And whether there's something about the tax designation that causes that, I haven't found it yet. The tax cards appear to be identical between blue and not blue. So the request to Judy would be to compare the tax maps for anything owned by the town of Shabig to the data layer that's showing up and make the data layer accurate. And that would be the cheapest and easiest way.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So update the data there. But maybe Bob, you could direct her to talk to Bob. He knows where the discrepancies are.
Yep. And I don't know how fine tuned we want to get, but it might be helpful, for instance, to show on page 2, the 1.7 acre, where that is in relation to Old Meeting House Lane, what lot it's next to, if somebody's concerned or interested in that, you know what I mean? Maybe
Yeah.
just a little more detail. This is Roy Hill Road, this is Division Point Road, this is.
Yeah, if you look at the first map, it actually has the roads on it.
Oh, okay.
The second map, I just didn't check that layer on the GIS viewer. So all these are is screenshots
Yeah.
of the viewer and then annotated in a PDF writer.
Yeah.
But yes, so before posting it, Vika, let me get you an updated version of this that shows the roads and such.
Oh, I was gonna ask you for something. Yeah.
Yeah.
I wasn't just gonna scan this in. I figured I'd communicate with you for email.
So roads, Mark, any other kind of information? that you-
Well, I would have had one question specifically on the Carrot property, where in relation to where you're proposing to look at is the land trust trail. might be a question that might come up.
I could sketch in approximately where it is,
Just so somebody's wondering about, concern about it.
and I could ask the land trust if they have an actual data layer with that. Anything else?
Do you want this to be on the next agenda?
If we have the information file.
Go ahead.
All right, so tabling this item until next meeting. 23-0010 to review the town communication policy and necessary action. So basically, there was talk about the emailing. And then also at the last meeting, the budget workshop, we were talking about making one sole email for the board of selectmen. So,
I did ask the tech company about that. So I tried going through the budget. I haven't gone through all of it on so far, but that's one of the things that I did try to dwell into a little bit deeper. And so the cost for each email for the town is $12 a month. So each of you, it would be, $12 times 6 times 12. The tech company said that by all means, there could be one email. The experience with them is they don't have a lot of the municipalities that do that because of the freedom of access request. It would be difficult to have that, if that were to ever happen, if, the town went to court or whatever, and it was requested, that would make things a little bit more difficult. But he did say by any means, if that's something that the town was interested. I don't know the full details of behind it, they would have to set you guys up for that, but that is an option.
Karen,
So I did check because it's a bit of a mix. I mean, I absolutely think we need to get on the town email server. I think the reason I suggested one selectman email, I mean, the town of Long Island set up that way. It's interesting, some towns are not even posting emails and they have a online web form that you submit your questions. And that gets distributed to the selectmen, but there's no emails available. I guess what I want to get away from is using my personal email for town stuff. I need to segregate. I feel like we should segregate them. I don't get why it's a freedom of information concern. And there are a number of towns, I can think of at least a dozen towns that are using just a selectman email. The advantage is that's always the same, just like Vika's email, somebody else is in the position, it doesn't matter, you don't have to change anything. And the other part is that the communication then is distributed to the board as a unit. And, it's sort of.
The one option that they did suggest that I had briefly mentioned in the past is, so to not pay for the emails, it could be where it's within, so, we have our tech company and all of the emails that end in townshipbigisland.org, the selectmen can have their email, and if you communicate within the emails of the townshipbigisland.org emails, then it's free. But it's that responding to the outside emails, and with a lot of the websites, with they're dwelling into the research of the town website having to be updated or upgraded. That's one of the options where, like, internally they set it up so the physical email addresses aren't showing, but then they're still connected to some email addresses. So it's the whole like tech world that seems very intertwined.
When I talked to Long Island, what they said is you have to have a system. So they have an auto reply. If somebody sends an email to the selectman email, it sends out a reply, we got your email, thanks, that's gonna get distributed to the selectmen. If there's gonna be a response, they have a protocol that I guess it's the chairman that responds. But again, even the response goes to all the selectmen. So it's just a different kind of system. I think one thing about it is if we are supposed to act as a unit, it kind of encourages that kind of operation. And it's mostly, it's, all different kinds of towns. I think the other option, but I don't think we're there with our website, is to kind of have a web form. I mean, most of the big towns, Wells, Cape Elizabeth, all the larger towns seem to be going to this format of, no access to people, no email correspondence. It's basically a webmail. I think that gets distributed to the board.
To the emails.
And so,
And that would be with the town upgrade email, that's something that would be,
possible.
I don't know if it's possible, I think it's automatically built in with the,
I think the advantage of that is then there aren't emails on the website that can get whatever it is, snagged.
yes.
And that, it sort of gives people a specific format to submit, and also discourages people from these like diatribes. Because, you have a little web form, you can't write like 10 pages.
Yes.
So that's, and I guess, as I said at the budget meeting, and I don't know if you've heard that, Vika, but I feel like the fire department needs an email because it was really hard to find how to get in touch with them by email. So I think the major departments, clerk, Vika, but anybody that's going to be continually emailed, but I don't care how we do it. I think it should be at least on the town server. And I kind of think it's better for a FOIA request when it is, if it, the town, the administrator there, Ion, should have access to all our emails. And then, whether we do it as a web form or a single email, I don't think we need to pay for 5 emails when we're all one group. And Lana, they're cheap, so they have one. That's exactly what
Well, I talked to them quite a bit about their website. What they do is, they don't use Tree at all, but I'm good friends with Amy, so she's always asking me, and they're trying to push towards modernizing that. Their website is, so that a lot of the expenses that we have, they don't, and that's how they save a lot of the monies, or a lot of the money, but I agree. I think that, and it's something that I think this town has slowly, when I first started working, an IT department within the municipality was non-existent. We would call David for help, or we hired somebody else one time, and then Marjorie got, it could have been Herb that helped with it too, but this company is just, they know. And we call them, and so they expect, our having to switch our emails to them. We're not calling them now, and then they're charging us $110 an hour when we can't get into our emails. So there are expenses, but then there's also some savings to it because they get right into our computer, they know how to get to the problem. But then they agreed that emails should be, the fire department should have one, public works should have one, and they should all be town@ShebigIsland.org, not, Shebig Fire and Rescue at Gmail, or, at Hotmail, whatever the public works one is, so.
Yeah, and I think at some point, we're replacing some of our physical technology now, but I think we really should. I think the website's pretty important for a town in this day and age, and I think we need an upgrade. I don't, and Vika had a very good description of why she just wants to go with what we have right now for the extra 3,000. I'm fine with that, but I do think, our communication with the community is really important. And now that I've spent a lot of time looking at other towns' websites, and it doesn't seem to relate. I mean, all the big towns have great websites, but even some really small towns do. And in some ways, you need the technology more with a small town.
Yeah.
So I really think we should, think about a technology plan.
Yeah, just quickly, I agree with Carol. I don't think we need 5 separate emails. I don't care how we get there. I think it's important to get there though. In other words, this is how it's gonna work. This is standard procedure.
Yeah.
This is how we're going to see the communications that come in from the public that are replied to automatically and or by the chair. I think that's important.
So can I just respond to your comment a while ago about not using your own personal email? I made my own email when I joined the board of select. I made a specific email. That's what I use. That's just solely board of select. But I'm using my computer and my phone. So view. So where, I mean, you're talking about a technology plan. I made a proposal during the budget to get us a computer so that we can have access to these. So no, we're not using our personal items.
But we won't, to have access, the way I would understand it, and her correct me if I'm wrong, because you're probably more in the know, but to have a selectman email at shabik.org, we can use our own computers. We don't need a town computer to access that. We might have to access it over the web, or it gets forwarded to our personal email, but to the public, that's what they see. To us, it might come in through my personal email, but it's really how it's handled on the town side, so that it is a public, if there was a FOIA request, then it can be publicly requested through that email, right? I mean, have I got that basically right?
Yeah, I don't know what your concerns are, but, exactly, but I'm sure we probably ought to do this, in a different venue. It's not really a communication policy issue here.
I understand,
But there are plenty of options and Ion can help you. Go work through those. I've talked to those guys, they seem pretty good.
so would the board entertain calling Island and having a meeting with them? Or are we?
It came up in the context of the budget.
Yeah.
And Vika budgeted 5 emails, and so I made the suggestion that we reduce that. So it was really a cost question. And then the separate step is the communication process. And I have some examples of what other towns have that I can distribute. But I think that's a separate, updating the communication. It's really what a lot of towns have is an email communication policy. And that's maybe what we want to update.
So as far as, so this is what the town has for a communication policy. And the last time it was updated was in 2013, I guess, to kind of, I'll follow up with Ion and see what the process would be for one email and how it would work and internally how that would get distributed. But as far as what's within this policy that's in front of us, are there things that you feel need to be added or changed separately from the email discussion? Because it has come up a number of times in the past.
Well, I think it's just an open discussion. I'm not sure. Should I be?
Yes. Please.
So what I think came up, I think where I felt there was some confusion initially, is the whole bit about, and I think that's partly the way MLA handles it, but I feel like an email to the entire board that, and if it's a selectman email, it sort of becomes a non-issue. But, here's the information on something. As long as we're not having a discussion by email, if we're distributing information, then I don't think it's a meeting. I don't have any concerns about that. The only thing that, and I think maybe clarifying in our policy, and I did find some good examples of what other towns have put in there, that basically, as long as it's not a discussion or deliberation, that it's okay to communicate by email. I think it might also be helpful when this was written, or at least it references something from 2007, that's a long time ago. So I think this needs an update, but I haven't gone through and edited it myself. I'm happy to if that's something you want to do.
So the reason I wanted to put this on was because there was talk before the budget meeting about the one email and having, revise all that. I don't mind having one email. We just need to have, the policy reflect on how the email is answered.
Yep, and I've got.
So that's all I'm concerned about. Whether it's the chair that answers it, whether it's a designated select board member that answers it, I don't care. I just don't want to have the issues that we had the last time, the previously. That was, I don't want anything to be questioned about how we're handling business. That's all. That's why I put this on. I mean, it doesn't have to be changed today, but if we do move forward with the budget, and then we move forward with doing this one email, we need to update this. Here.
Yeah, and I think we would do that because the budget, it's for the next fiscal year, so we have some time. I did research and find some examples that I think are pretty good in terms of how there's a couple different ways to do it. What I suggest is I give those to Vika, she can distribute them. I don't know if we need it on the next meeting or anything, but I think rather than me go through and edit the policy, I would suggest you guys look at this and then we talk about it. I think, we want to keep it manageable and practical and not, this almost sounded like it came up because there was a problem. I kind of would like to, sort of prevent confusion, but make it accessible. And I also think we have to be clear on how the public interacts with us so that they know.
I kind of want to go against what part of what Carol just said. I would ask if Carol could go ahead and draft up some revisions as a proposal. I think the number of us on the board who are interested or deeply involved with emails, maybe a little bit smaller. And I think there's a few board members who are more involved in that part of the world. But if you would be willing to
Happy to.
do a red line draft for us of what you propose would work well, and let us react to that. And those other examples could be good backup material along with the draft, but you could share all that via the old style email, all the addresses. I think that'd be a good way to move forward with it. And I think what you said about the public also, we need to have something very clearly where it's click here to come, click here to send an email to the selectman, whether that brings up an email or whether that brings up a form, I don't care. But where it says click here to communicate with the selectman, there should be a paragraph that says you will get a response acknowledging that your email was received. And any issues that you bring up will be discussed at the next select board meeting. Something clear like that that indicates we don't make decisions outside of the meeting, that kind of thing. But if Carol, if you're willing to draft that.
I'm happy to do that if you want.
My suspicion is you have access to technical information, technical resources on a regular basis.
No, that's not, no, it's not his bag. I actually think Vika and I should work on this together because it affects her life especially.
Yep.
And,
Good point.
and maybe a web form is a good way to go because it controls people.
I think it's an excellent way to go.
And I do think, that is one of the things that when I had a meeting about the website, that they're transitioning.
Yeah, it seems like towns are going that way.
So maybe ask Ion to see how much it would cost to do a type of form, type of communication.
That would be all website based.
Right.
Versus-
So
they're
that would
just
either
the-
be an email.
They're just, they would just be the servers of the email itself.
So Ion doesn't do web page building.
No,
No. It's a municipal company that we use. Or the company that we have, they do municipal websites.
So we could ask that company, can you give us an email replacement page? I'm pretty sure they could do that pretty easily.
Not with the current site that we have, we can upgrade.
Pretty sure they could with the current site.
no.
They won't do anything else other than what we have. We don't pay and we
We pay
don't.
$900.
We have the basic bone minimum and that's why we paid so little for it.
Sorry.
So if I just, oh,
Go ahead.
So go ahead.
I'll let Carol, if Carol and I get together on this, and if we maybe just kind of, push this few meetings, because this doesn't seem like it's a pressing, and we have some other things that probably could.
Yeah.
And then, okay.
I just wanted to say very quickly with this page right here, I do remember it from years ago. I don't have a problem with any of it. A lot of it is standard operating expectation, codes of conduct, first of all. Second of all, a lot of it's state law, so.
Yep.
That's what that, quick one.
Yeah.
Just, I was the sort of the policy Nazi in these days, doing these things. My intention with these things is always to try to get the kernel in there and encourage discussion and development of these things into real, live documents. We weren't very good at that. And so you're looking at something that's very old that hasn't sort of followed our business, not business, but our practices as a town. So you should feel free to tweak these things at any time, because they're really just trying to carry institutional knowledge forward between all the selectmen who come into the flow and work with things. And I kept the email thing very short and a simple quote out of the main townsman for that very reason, because it was all over the place. And it was a very hard topic, and I had no silver bullets. It was to encourage discussion and just what you're doing now. It's taken us 10 years to get here, but here we are, so good for you.
So I think if we had one uniform email, it would make this policy a little neater, be less questions.
Well, and I'll talk to Vika about a web form, sort of skips the whole email problem. And so we'll see.
I don't know, you're not gonna communicate with each other through that one, so it's still that.
Yeah, okay, that's fine.
I think that the behind the scenes, there's still an email that.
You're
needs
probably
to
right.
go to. Because that's the way he explained it to me, that, we
That
could,
is-
if there's a town administrator page, it said, write town administrator, no, and then it bumps into my emails.
Yeah, you're right.
But if I understand correctly, we are not each going to have an inbox that says town should be. I'm still going to get whatever is distributed through that form or that select board email address. That's going to get routed to my ripple963@gmail.com address.
I don't know the answer to that.
And that's what, like I said, I gotta dig deeper with him and figure out exactly how it's gonna work and how they would set that up to make it work.
The only way that it isn't what I just said is if we pay for the individual mailbox.
Speaking for myself, if you can keep it simple, it might work for me.
That's what I'm asking, if the board's interested in having a meeting with them, is it, hear from the
Let me
horse's
get,
mouth.
let me get the information from him and I can get something in writing from him versus
Yeah.
coordinate another
Okay.
meeting
We
with
got
6 of us and then another company.
Got it,
And one more thing, working with a company like that, the more you can identify your criteria in really clear terms, like, we want to solve this problem, we want to solve this problem, we want to solve this problem, we want to solve this problem. Then they can use their knowledge of the technology to propose something. To just ask for an upgrade or ask for a single email is going to get you, simple options or confusing options. So the better you can define that, the better off it'll be.
I'll talk to them.
All right, any more comments on this topic? Table this to a future meeting. Depending on when Vika and Carol get together, information is compiled. All right, moving on to 23-0011, to hear an update from PFAS sampling. So I'll hand that off to either Carol or Vika.
Yeah, I'll make this very quick. So as part of the landfill monitoring program, the DEP requested that we sample the landfill and the typical typical residential wells that we sample for PFAS. They're kind of in the process of doing a survey. This is a voluntary program. We agree to do it. They pay the cost. But, you know, it was incorporated into the sampling. So you probably know that we have PFAS contaminated wells at the school and the rec center. And they're well above the current drinking water standard. The school has installed treatment, and after a few bumps along the road, I think we're in good shape. The rec center, as far as I know, is not treating their water and not using, I don't know exactly what they're doing. It's a mystery. So those two wells are pretty seriously contaminated, not terribly, but they're contaminated, and it's not just marginal. So on the landfill, I just wanted to report that the two residential wells came up without any detections of PFAS compounds, which is great.
What two residential wells?
One was Bose and one was Charlie Quincy's.
Okay, so nearby.
place.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right, and those are the two wells that are in the program, you know, typically. So according to the DEP, you know, those don't need to be checked again for PFAS. They're comfortable. It's a one-shot deal. The monitoring well in the landfill, which is not very deep, did come up with PFAS above the main standards. I don't think we're gonna have to do much there. It is a little surprising to me, like, they're not too concerned about it. I'm a little concerned about it, more from like, why is it there? But I just wanted to let you know, I've been dealing with the DEP now for almost a year, trying to get them to agree to sample the residential wells around the school, because they are at risk, and they typically do that in other communities. It depends on the threshold and all this jazz. So now that we have the landfill information, we don't totally know the source at the school. What I'd like to do is put together a letter that's somewhat technical, but have it come from the town requesting that the department, you know, pay for the sampling of these residential wells. Because I think that's the state's obligation. They got $60 million, and we should get some of that money. I don't think the homeowners should have to do it. And there's like 6 or 8 houses there, and you know, that's what they normally do. We're falling in this bureaucratic sort of black hole, because it's not a registered sludge spreading site, even though we suspect sludge was used. That's why we aren't getting sampled. And what they told me to do, I mean, this is sort of their advice to me, was also copy my legislator, which I'll do, which is Steve Moriarty, because it's a political thing at this stage of the game. So anyway, I before I go through that effort, I wanted to make sure that was okay with you guys. And it would
Where
be,
do we think sludge might have been spread?
the sludge was used as a soil amendment when we redid the baseball field. We know that, it's in the plans.
Okay. Did not know that.
And it could be from that, but we also have other rural schools in the middle of friggin' nowhere with PFAS, so it may not be that. But my request would be that they would sample the soil so we can determine that, because if they've remediated it, then we could stop treating at the school.
I think it's a good idea if you're willing to write the letter for the town.
Okay.
Fine with me. Will the school not care if we do this?
No, in fact, they'd be delighted. And just, it's $500 per household to sample, so it's not something you want them to have to do. But good news is, our chairman's well is fine.
Yeah.
I was sweating it out, bro.
Coming over to take a shower.
Yeah, well, I asked the gentleman from Suriname about, asked him a lot of questions. So, he was quite informative. Yeah, kudos.
And we did pay the bills and send in once we paid them, we needed to send the proof of payment to the DEP, so we should be getting reimbursed.
Well, thank you very much, Carol, for offering to do that.
I think we should, I think we owe it to our residents, but it's,
Well, not only the residents, it might help us determine or pinpoint where, not quite sure. Thank you. All right, any other comments on this topic?
All right, moving on. 23-0012 to discuss the stormwater RFQ and take any necessary action.
So if you remember, I had volunteered to try to find more people to respond to the RFP. And to do that, I called a guy at Collins that we had heard from a long time ago and said, just out of the blue, who would you consider to be the experts in the area of developing sea level rise, monitoring scenarios, negotiating with FEMA? If they say you need to plan for 50, but the state says you need to plan for 20, who are the right people to talk to? And he was hard to get a hold of. He finally got back to me. He gave me 2 names to contact. One was a company called Weston and Sampson, I believe, and the other was the Woods Hole Group. Reached out to them, got no answer, reached out to them again. Woods Hole came back and said, sorry, not interested at this time. It turns out they've got a contract for the entire state of Maine now, and they're pretty busy. Weston and Sampson finally got back to me and said, I'm really sorry, we didn't get back to you sooner. The main person that you were trying to reach was out with COVID. We are interested, but we're just getting back on top of things. And when we finally talked, it was 2 days before the original deadline. And she said, your deadline is tomorrow. I said, well, we're gonna have a select board meeting in a week. Let me ask if we could get an extension. She said, I said, how long do you need? And she said, it typically takes us 2.5 weeks. If you could give us till March 1st, that would be great. Meanwhile, on the last day, Vika got a response from a company called GZA or something like that. And that's, I'm guessing, because one of the people who replied worked with Collins at the time that Collins worked for us. She's now with GZA, and the guy that I talked to at Collins, guessing, called her up at her new company and said, hey, this is the kind of work you guys do. You might be able to help these guys. So they sent in a set of their qualifications. So we now have 2, and if we wait till March 1st, we'll have 3. And I think, you know, looking at 3, getting those 3 to submit bids, then we'd be in good stead, knowing we were getting 3 proposals to compare. So I would propose that we delay until March 1st, and then March 1st, look at the 3 proposals that we have. I don't think any more are going to come in, but look at those 3 proposals and then make a decision as to which proposal to go with.
We will get that for our March 1st meeting.
They would submit by March 1st. We have a meeting on March 1st?
Yes.
Sarah,
I think we tell them they have to get it to us a week before March. We're asking for qualifications. They're not putting together a bid. So I think they either get it together in time for Vika to include it in the March 1st packet or not. That's kind of how I feel.
So that would mean that we would need it, I mean, we get the packets to you guys, we try to get them done by Friday before the meeting, so that's the 24th. The challenge that we're running into for that week is she's gonna be out for a week, for a medical visit. And so, Kathy is gonna be working to try to help me put the packets together and up on the website. And, I've been told that, I guess it's not a common practice to put the RFQs on public blast, which is why I didn't put them out this time. So we wouldn't have to worry about, you know, getting them up on the website or anything like that, but if you want copies of them, then it would be, they would need to be in by that Friday, or I could do what I did this time and just forward them instead of, you know, printing out 200 pages times 6.
I'm fine getting it electronically. It's just we need it. It can't come even a week of, for me, it would have to come by that Friday, or whatever that date is.
The Friday before the 1st?
Yeah, realistically. And you know, this is qualifications. That should be something that press the button and generate. If they're that interested, they can do it.
The one thing that I will mention that, with these RFQs, we are, you know, a couple months into the wave process now. I don't think a few weeks is gonna hurt. I think the more numbers we have, the better by any means. We do have the Shore and Harbor grant that is sitting there and is waiting. And our requirements for the grant timeframe is between August 1st of 2022 and December 31st of 2023. So the longer we wait, the quicker we're gonna have to work, you know, to get through that grant requirements on the other end of it. So to just keep that in mind.
So I should tell them that they need to get it by the 24th if they would.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Bob, what's the name of that company?
Weston Sampson,
Weston Sampson?
Weston and Sampson. And to be just clear, when I suggested to them, you guys just hammer this out, shouldn't take a couple days, right? They said they normally, it's a minimum of 2 weeks for their
Well,
marketing
that's,
department to put it together.
that's, I think it's realistic. We're gonna,
Yep.
you know, see how interested they are.
The other suggestion is, just because with the whole grant and the grants and applications for that and making sure we're following the proper steps. I don't know if it's necessary or not, but the RFQ that was out, the deadline was February 9th. It might make sense to have a motion. Because, just so I put it back out there so that we're not somehow,
Accuse of favoritism or anything
being
like that.
viewed as if it's, so if you could make a motion to, put the RFQ back out to bid until, or, advertise it until the 24th, then at least then it would.
I would move that we move that deadline to the 24th.
Second, Carol second. All right. Any discussion? Mark?
And just to be clear in my quick head, this process of choosing someone for this is to help us with the floodplain, the FEMA floodplain recommendation and the recommendations of elevation of any facility that we may try to design later.
And it's also so right now, the base flood elevation, I think, is 20, which is, so they're gonna do a site-specific study, which will likely lower that significantly.
And this firm, if hired, this firm, if hired, will also do the physical negotiations with FEMA?
They submit a report to FEMA, which no guarantee that FEMA will accept. But that's the process. But what Bob mentioned, I do want to be sure people are aware, because I just found this out this fall. The Department of Transportation is doing the same effort for the entire coast. Correct. And they're using
Why
what
can't
I
they
would,
come over here?
they're using the Cracker Jack
Who's all?
Woods Hole Group, which is really the best. So the deadline for when they're supposed to be done it's 2024 into 25. So we gain a year at the most. I don't know what happens if they come up with something different. That could be a challenge. So that's something we need to talk to DOT about.
And hopefully, if we engage with one of these firms, they will be aware of that.
Yeah.
We would want to make it.
It should be, that's what.
Seems like a pretty small.
I mean, that's one of the big parts in our RFQ is, the description in that and the knowledge that this grant is, because it's $47,000 that we got for a grant to.
And of course, what happened is we had, communities doing them all individually, and the state's like, this is stupid, because it's way more expensive to do them, so then the state decided to do it, but I didn't, it was hard to find that information out, but anyway, I think,
So
we do
just,
gain some time if we do it ourselves.
so just my comment to this is we postponed this, or not postponed, but we've moved the deadline twice now.
Yeah.
Twice. I'd like to urge the board to make a decision on March 1st. Come to the meeting with either a decision or a kind of direction that we're gonna go, so that we're not continuously having meetings on this to try to decide. So.
And the board does have an option, once you have those 3 in front of you or however many to seek to do, interviews or to have conversations with the firms to help you determine which firm you ultimately want to work with.
Yeah, I don't mind if, just some kind of decision, whether we go with one, or we interview all three, or we don't like any of them. I need a decision made. It doesn't matter. I don't want it to go, I would prefer not have it go back to
More quotes.
yeah, more work. Yeah, yeah. All right. Any other comments? What? All right, all in favor? All right, moving on. All right. Communications,
I shared mine already.
all right. Yes, Bob.
I think this might be the right time to bring it up. Jen and I were asked to talk to Coastal Water, Justin, about the Cousins float and what we might want to do over there. So we had that conversation today. Do we want to cover that in correspondence, or do we want to put that on the next agenda?
I think it would be good to have that as an agenda item. Is it a discussion that could potentially require selectmen making any kind of decision, or could it be a discussion item with like an update on?
It could be a discussion. We're not looking for any decisions other than giving us the go-ahead to have more conversations, but it's conversations with the joint committee, possibly with DOT, that kind of thing. So maybe we do want to have that as an agenda item. I'm okay either way. Jim, what do you think?
I mean, we're not, it's for you guys to go gather information. It's not for us to make a decision. It's more or less
Giving us the
us
go-ahead.
allowing you to keep going.
I can give you a recap in 5 minutes if you want. But,
I don't know if it would be more of the procedure on that.
I mean, I guess it just did. Are you sharing a brief communication, or you're having an open communication about it? I guess look in terms of earlier discussion with the fire department under, communications and the street signage and all of that. I think that's an example of it led a little farther than it could have for brief communication. So I guess you can gauge as far as how much of a discussion, or whether it should be as an agenda item, so it allows people who could possibly be interested in that topic to be present for it.
Carol's gonna say something.
Well, and if you recall, at the budget meeting, I suggested that the select board meet with Coastal Waters to hammer out this harbor master job description. I don't know if the board agrees with that, but that's a suggestion I made. And it seems to me that we have enough, this could also be on an agenda with the Coastal Waters Committee. And rather than this back and forth, which seems to be taking forever, it seemed like meeting together would be, in a workshop format would make more sense, but that was my idea.
I think we agreed as a board in the budget meeting to have that workshop with Coastal Waters about the job description. Let me agree to that. That's what I put in the notes.
Okay,
Yeah,
But this is not that, this is different.
but I mean, could we do both?
Well, we could, but if we spend 5 minutes talking about this, then we can keep moving forward if we want to.
Okay.
We start, if you guys think it's out of line, just say shut up. How about that? Okay, so we started with what do we want to accomplish? Why do we need to make changes to cut? 5 items. 1, to improve CTC access in terms of slightly deeper water would be a possibility. If we move the dock out, they've got deeper water, they have issues with the shallows. Number 2, better control of pump tie-ups. Number 3, increase the number of pumps tie-ups. Number 4, possibly provide a touch and go dock for Shadigger so that we're not using Yarmouth's float for touch and go, dropping people off, that kind of thing. Matt had pointed that out, that was a bit of an issue for them, how much we use it. He wasn't complaining, but he made a point of mentioning it. And number 5, provide space for a possible 80-foot ramp instead of the current 45-foot ramp that we have. Some points to that, Coastal Waters, a couple of years back, had decided in their meeting that we didn't need an 80-foot ramp over there, but that was a couple of years ago. Coastal Waters also knows that if we're gonna do any work over there and we want federal money, that it's gonna have to be ADA compliant, which means it has to be an 80-foot ramp. So Coastal Waters was kind of saying 2 things there, but they understood they were saying 2 things. Third factor for the 80-foot ramp, it's a safety concern for CTC passengers, island residents. Coastal Waters did say in 2018, we don't think it's worth it just to add an 80-foot ramp, but if there are other benefits, then maybe it is worth spending the money on it. And then we had a discussion about who originally brought up the need for an 80-foot ramp over there. Was it CTC or was it the select board? And we didn't have an answer to that question. We then talked about whether this was a priority item to address, given we've got the stone pier on our plate, we've got Bennett's on our plate. How many things can we have on our plate at one time? We didn't answer that question. So the question is to whether, if we did decide to try to do something over there, whether it could be funded totally or partially by monies in the sinking fund. Then we realized we don't know how much money is in that fund, so we'd like to ask Nat how much money is in that fund, unless Deacon knows. Lastly, 20 years ago, when this whole consent agreement was first reached, there was talk about CTC being given access by the DOT issuing an ultimatum, that access being at Wyman. And at that time, DOT declared that it was better to use the Cousins lot, what that used to be called the Blanchard lot, instead of going to Wyman. In that 20 years, sea levels have gone up, traffic levels have gone up, the number of parking spaces have probably gone up. So a question we could ask, first talking to Nat and the Joint Standing Committee, but then talking to DOT, is it time to revisit that question? Especially knowing that supposedly Wyman, the power company, Florida Power and Light, just gave a chunk of land from their land to Yarmouth for some reason. We don't know why yet. So learning more about that might be a good thing. And lastly, the point that Coastal Waters reminded Jen and me that in 2018, Coastal Waters asked the select board to begin enforcing basically tie-ups on the Cousins dock. And as far as they know, as far as we knew, select board has never taken action on that request. It's only been 5 years. But they asked that we consider taking action on that request in terms of enforcement. So.
All right, I think it might be a little on the cusp of needing an agenda item.
Okay.
You're asking us to make a decision and do some discussion on certain things that was, like I said, kind of borderline.
I would ask this, is it okay for Jen and Bob and Justin or some subset of them to talk to Nat in advance of any conversations with DOT? Just to begin that process. To learn what's in the sinking fund and what he sees it being used for, that kind of thing.
I think that's a communication that should be going through the town administrator. That's my instinct on that. You're talking about with Yarmouth, communication with Yarmouth? Yeah, I mean, that's,
Well, you're on the joint standing committee, right?
yeah, I think that's a communication that probably should go.
That works.
So what's the board think? Mark?
A lot of great stuff on that list, by the way. Stuff that we should have taken care of 22 years ago. I'm trying to. I think we need a workshop with coastal waters, first of all. Second of all, I agree with Vika that if you guys want to really talk seriously with Yarmouth, it should be through a joint standing meeting setting. And I hope that you do. And hope there are some serious discussions about where we are now and where we could be or should have been in the first place, if you will. I also agree with a lot of the other statements about Sheboygan not paying attention to the flow over there, but it's just the way it's gone. So I thank you for that, but I'd like to see a formal workshop between both the law.
I don't mind a workshop, but I'd like the TA and the Yarmouth Standing Committee to get together and talk. As far as going to talk to DOT, I think Yarmouth needs to at least be notified. So I think in that meeting, you guys can talk about it, get their input on it. They wouldn't mind you guys going to talk to them, so that we're not stepping on anybody's toes or doing something like something back. As far as putting a meeting with Coastal Waters, we can do that at any time.
So how about we ask Vika to schedule a workshop with the two committees and ask Vika to talk to Nat about Deacon, do you think we need an actual meeting of the joint standing committee to have this conversation, or can you ask some of these questions of Matt just one-on-one?
If you want to forward me what you have, I can shoot him an email and then we can figure out if he feels that he wants to include his numbers into the discussion or can go from there.
Mark.
Workshop with coastal waters.
Yeah, the last piece was supporting documents. We looked at drawings that have been done in the past by both Custom Folks and Barney Baker regarding different alternatives for piers over there. Nat had expressed support for the idea of some finger floats that added dinghy tie-up, punt tie-up, skiff tie-up for us, so that we weren't bleeding over onto his dock. And so we thought that'd be a good idea. It could be done in a way that achieved CTC's goals as well, but I think that's what we can talk about in the workshop and look at the actual drawings.
Yeah. Just extremely quickly, and I'm sorry if I'm a broken record on this point, but if you decide to schedule a joint standing committee meeting with Yarmouth, I would strongly urge that CTC gets invited to have some representation at that meeting. I know that there's an ongoing, pretty good relationship between the two entities.
Jen, do you guys remember, Nat made a pretty clear statement. We talked about when do we get together next time, and I think I said like 2 weeks, and I think Nat said like summer or something.
I think it was, I feel like 6 months, maybe. I'd have to look at my notes, but I feel like
It's something like 6
a
months, yeah.
6-month time frame is what I was thinking,
This spring is basically.
which.
Yeah, okay. That makes sense. All right.
Yeah, our meet and greet didn't really go meet and greety. It was more just sit down and listen to what they had to say.
Our turn.
All right, I have a communication, unless there's somebody else. that has.
I have one, but I can go after.
All right, so there was a communication from my wife a long time ago. And then, Ernie reminded me of the communication when I spoke to him on the phone, and then Bob just reminded me about the ramps that are going down on both sides, the Cousin side and the Big Island side. Very large openings on either side. Concern Ernie's, and my wife's concerned, especially this last time after she lost up the billboard, is that the openings are very large. Potentially a kid falling over, rolling right in those gaps.
So on the ramp itself?
On the ramp itself, the railing itself. Building code, you can't have things any less than 3 or 4 inches so that the kid doesn't have, but yet on a ramp that everybody uses is 2-3 feet wide, that anything. So I'd like to have the public works to do something, either just some kind of fencing or some kind of zip tie, something, either something temporary for now until we come up with something, a better solution, or
There's that orange mesh that they use, pretty easy to zip tie that to the structure.
Yeah.
Should be $100 project. I agree with asking Public Works to take a look at that.
all right. Thank you.
Good idea. Good idea. I love the coffee. Yeah, that's it.
The communication I just want to share with you publicly, which I forwarded to you, was a communication from the town attorney, an email. She's at the point where she feels like it probably would be wise to schedule an executive session to bring the board up to date where things stand. A large number of documents have been sent over in the last couple of weeks. If you could let me know one way or another, and I will get a couple dates from her, if you feel like that would be helpful. If not, then she'll just keep doing what she's doing. But I had a very brief conversation with her today, and she's at that point where she's being very understanding of the cost, but also wants to make sure that everyone's updated. and she doesn't, lead in a direction that the town doesn't want her to. So I think it would be wise to have a brief, 30-minute to an hour conversation with her, but if you don't think so, then we won't do it, but you let me know either way.
Yeah,
I can't remember, but in her email, did she have a date, or something or other that something was gonna happen?
There are some dates coming up, and that's why if you could take a look at the 2 emails that I forwarded you this week and those communications and see if that could help you guide and whether you feel like that's enough for you from that communication, or if you wanna set something up and let me know by the end of the week at the latest, and then I can try to see if there's a couple dates that are coming up to meet.
so my thoughts, I think it'd be useful to have another, and I'm assuming a Zoom meeting.
It would be,
just to
yes, it would be a
complex,
Zoom.
as soon as she's available. I don't have an issue unless we have. Bob,
She said in her email she was available tomorrow from 10 to 1 and Friday for a couple of hours. I would ask that we put it off till next week if we could. I'm leaving town tomorrow morning.
With that email, it was in reference to me calling her to touch base with her. That wasn't specific to the executive session, but I told her today I'd check in with you. If you were okay with the executive session, I'd get a couple evening dates for a possible Zoom that could work, and then follow up if that's. what
We're meeting on
you're all-
budget next Wednesday. Would it
And
make sense to
Saturday.
have a Zoom before that budget discussion, or should we have it? I'm okay with that.
I'm fine. And any day, well, obviously, this has the meetings. Carol?
Yeah, I'd prefer to consolidate it, because we have 2 meetings next week, right? Wednesday and Saturday, so maybe prior to the select board meeting on Wednesday.
So let's wait to hear back from Natalie, just try to push our Monday, Tuesday, would be great for us.
If, so if that Wednesday doesn't work, do you wanna, for the following week, would that work?
And if,
Wednesday.
I'm probably the only one that commutes by ferry, and I can try to come home early if, if it's Wednesday, but just try to keep the vote schedule in mind.
Yes.
So Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday for the meeting.
Monday, Tuesday of next week, or Wednesday before the meeting?
I can't Monday. Yeah, I can't do Monday either. Monday the 20th? Yeah. And then
Did you
that's
put
a
your
holiday.
board off yet?
Oh, that's, so Wednesday.
They've been running them all week.
So the 22nd, we have a meeting at 6. But whether we do the Zoom meeting before,
I wish I would try to come home early. That helps me because it's all one day.
so which we would probably try to do here, so that way we can just stop and go to that, or we try to do something Tuesday.
Where would the Zoom meeting be if you tried to do it before the meeting? I don't. see
Here.
It would be here.
We show up at 5.
Kind of crammed a lot, isn't it?
Yeah, it would be a lot. Yeah.
Tuesdays, Tom's.
I mean, the other thing is if 1 or 2 of you want to join in on a meeting with me, so the whole, but then that's not everyone's being.
And I think we should all do it. And maybe it's too much to do it on Wednesday, so maybe Monday doesn't work. Jen's right, Tuesday is Tom Calder's service. So I don't think we have.
Just wait to see what she has on for openings.
I'll suggest Wednesday, the 22nd, 5 PM to her. If that doesn't work for her, then have her throw a couple dates at us.
Yeah.
Later after that day.
What's the date of Tom's thing again?
Tuesday, the 21st, in the 4 to 6.
I should know that.
And that's it. That's all it is. So.
Or,
That's all.
all right. Any other communications that I can think of? All right, moving on to approve minutes from January 18, 2023 to January 24th, 2023.
Oh, no, I
can't make that motion.
Well,
I wasn't here. Was Forget it.
No, February first, February
You can miss
first.
any minutes.
But you were here for both of them.
You were here for both, of them.
And we enjoyed your company.
February first.
A second Mark motion.
All right,
All right.
yeah,
And I'm sorry I didn't point this out, but I didn't look at when Chris sent it originally, but aren't we not supposed to make any motions within executive session?
Right.
right.
So I think that we have to just move.
Moving up, so, after
Yep.
the, yeah, the exit, okay.
Yeah.
where are you seeing that? Sorry.
So on the 18th,
Oh, yeah.
we moved to go in, then we moved to appoint the people, and then we moved to go out. We just have to move to go
Flip
out.
them over.
Yeah, just flip them.
All right.
That's right.
Yeah.
Which is happening.
Good catch. All right.
That changed that second Mark.
So we gotta change that. So. All right, all in favor with that change? All right, moving on to items to be placed on future agenda. So we have the
From War Park, yeah. The Bennett's Cove. Survey, thank you. Seco land discussion.
Broadway update.
coastal water workshop.
That'll be a future one.
And what was that?
Broadband update.
Facilities broadband update. That'll probably be the second one in March.
That was about the bond, right? That was about the bond, the broadband update was about the bond.
Right.
No, the electrical.
Oh, the
Yeah.
400 amp.
No, but I thought there was something that,
Oh, the broadband update?
yeah.
Yeah, I'm waiting until we get more information about the bond bank. And whole licensing agreement, so it will be probably on the next meeting, we'll have a whole licensing agreement between the town and CMP that legal has already marked up and looked through. And I'm waiting to get that.
So, we go to the facility, that's, for the power. Sitting on, Ford City.
That will be probably the second meeting in March.
All right, Mark, you had talked to me briefly when I came in.
Before you move off
Yeah.
that, could you, at some point, when you need Island back on, sometime can we have an update on where that stands,
Yeah,
when it's appropriate?
yeah, we haven't heard back from them yet, we should check in. So Bob, to talk, say about what you were talking about a while ago, that update that you gave about meeting with coastal water and stuff, probably could have been put into the, committee updates in the beginning. It's
Oh, yeah.
not really an official committee, but it is a committee. Okay. So,
Good to know.
just
We
thought
are
about it.
gonna, the planning board is gonna, the chair of the planning board is gonna come on the March 15th meeting to do an update where they stand with you know, the charges that they had to try to change some ordinances and.
Okay. Mark, to go back to you, about the dates on this, Mark said, had some concerns about, we only have, this one budget scheduled for capital expenditure, which is next, not this Saturday, but the following Saturday.
Okay.
My only point was, if there's anything we should have more than one shot at, it's capital. And I believe we're probably gonna have to make a slight adjustment, which we can do at our next meeting. We're going to get an updated version of where we are so far with our department markups that we've done. So at that meeting, I think we should decide moving forward, probably that March.
Yeah, there's a March 8th, 2023, this is a Wednesday,
Although it says,
and it's a third draft presentation.
yeah,
We can put in capital expenditure discussion.
we could, it's whatever you guys want to do, however, whatever your will is, and how much discussion you want to tolerate. But capital is really where it happens. That's really where you can make or break, you know, the budget, first of all, and how you plan for upgrades and projects. So I really think we need to think about an adjustment. I'm sorry I didn't see this sooner.
So
Probably did.
are you saying add it to March 8th?
I mean, we don't have to,
I don't think we have
we
to.
don't have to do. It's just that
Can I
if
comment?
you guys want to put just capital expenditure, because it's just, this one doesn't specify if it's a department budget or anything like that, it's a budget. So
We could.
So what I'm trying to do is for the 22nd to update everything from the department discussions. And then to date, anything that I have updated, so like I received a quote for the tractor finally, update the information that I know. For the 25th, I'm trying to get that capital booklet that I had found that Marjorie had been, and trying to get that done as much as I can. But then the meetings going after, as you're adjusting in the meetings, I'm going into the Trio system and updating it. So I'm hoping that, you know, come third, fourth joint committee with school, that any information that's been discussed or any anticipated expenses are in that Trio system. So you have the most current, up-to-date information. I don't know if that helps guide the discussion in any way.
Yeah, that'll help. I just think we need to spend some time on capital, make sure we present, you know, the best plan for whatever areas that we prioritize as needing funding along with some target goals, whether we're going to be spending money or bond. We need to be clear with the public on that.
So when do you find out if does the school just deal with capital? Are you expecting any capital requests coming from the school? And are there,
we haven't done anything yet.
so, and I know having been on the school committee, kind of how it works on their end, but do they get incorporated into the overall capital account? And so,
Historically, the capital goals and projects of the school are held in their budget, and the town is held over on the town side.
right, but for example, when they did the renovation, you know, that was a bonded amount.
That was a
That's
recommendation.
within,
for
yeah,
bond.
there are certain debts that fall within the town, so the selectmen, in essence, pick up the school bond bank.
So it would be important to know, I guess what I'm saying is I wouldn't want to finalize the capital budget until we know that the school is not coming in with a new bus or something like that. And then the other, just on the document that you have, Vika, Herb wrote that, and so we've been working on a little bit to try to simplify it, frankly, so I just want to be sure we don't duplicate efforts. One thing that I would recommend, I think in there right now, it has 7,500 as a threshold, I think we should make it 10,000. And so I didn't know how you wanted to handle updates to that document as a board.
Carol, do you and I want to have a talk about it if we're both working on the same document?
Yeah, I'm also working on the text, but the other thing I noticed is that some of the accounts have different names and definitions, and according to my husband, the rules police, that if we change them, we're supposed to go to that.
Town meeting, and that's what I started working on, is I've collected the meeting, the annual meetings in the last few years, and I'm going through them, making sure that the language is adequate. So physically updated the document, I haven't done any of that yet. So
All right,
if
you and I
have,
can,
then
you and I can get together,
Yes.
just so we're not duplicating things, but I think one of our goals should be to perhaps streamline the accounts and make sure the definitions. I think in some cases, we've been so specific that, because like the India Point is a good example. You know, it says retaining wall in some places, things and other things, but I think we should have a fund for whatever we're gonna do down there, which might not be a retaining wall, so we might wanna clarify that. But, and then I think some of the stuff we're talking about at Cousins, if we're gonna do anything, we might need a capital account. So I'll work with Vika on that, but I guess, so that's the answer to my question. But I think that, to me, we should do one pass, and I would agree with Mark, there should be a second review. Since that's the big chunk of change.
What if we just change the wording for March 8th as a third draft of department budget and capital expenditure 3, workshop 3.
Yeah, without being disrespectful to the department budgets, because I don't mean to be, we should be able to come close to finalizing the draft of the department budgets pretty quickly. Not gonna take us that much longer. There may be some disagreements about levels of funding.
well, I think the numbers, it's that you might adjust the numbers, and that was my experience from last year. With every meeting, you adjusted the numbers by a couple $100 here and there, and
What do
as
you
you got
think we're
closer, you cut a couple more $100, but then with the capital, that's where the big chunk thing, so.
Yeah, I'm just saying, I'm not promising we won't change any more line item in department, but departments are easier than capital budget. That's my opinion. That's my.
So my suggestion is to change March 8th, just the wording as third draft of department budget presented and capital expenditure, the third go at it workshop.
Do you have to be so specific, because that's what's going out to the public?
Just to let the public know that that's what we're gonna be working on.
And
Can we do third draft of departments and capital expenditures? We wanted to do.
Yeah. I guess. Just to make sure that we're talking about capital expenditures somehow.
And we may change our mind and either add yet another meeting, or because what you don't want to do too much, in my experience at least, is mix too much of department and capital, because you get too exhausted. Capital is just really, it is where the rubber hits the road as far as planning and having a good plan of saving or getting ready to have a plan for bonding for people to consider.
Eric?
So based on our meeting last week, the two things that stick in my mind is, one is the harbor master position could affect the departmental budget, depending on how we define that position. And then the other thing was, and I don't know how this works, is the debt service for the bond in the upcoming fiscal year So we're gonna add additional debt service. How do we, and I get that it's sort of paid by the subscribers, but initially is the town paying it? I don't quite understand. Do we need to know that number or the ballpark number in the budget, right?
Yes.
So how do we get that?
With as far as any additional bonding expenditures
For fiscal year 24, we are gonna have bond vacant,
for
more.
broadband, correct.
So you're gonna make an estimate of that?
What I did is I emailed bond bank and asked them what the breakdown would be for the maximum amount allowed, or the maximum that we would need, and then they gave me the breakdown. So for now, I'm just adding that number to be safe in case if for, some reason the whole amount is appropriated. And then as we get closer towards, it'll probably be closer towards the end of the budget that we would know the amount, that would be adjusted. So if anything, it would go down,
Okay,
because
so
I'm
worst
trying-
case, you're gonna put in the worst case scenario.
yes, which I don't think they would give us the full 750 anyways, but
So just a couple, just to keep moving on. The last budget meeting, we talked about possibly changing the scope of work for the harbor master, basically making it a stipend job. So that will mean we have to revisit his either job description or harbor master policy for the town or whatever type of documents we need. I'm not quite sure what do we have to do, but we have to either adjust those or redo certain policy or job
we should have that as
description.
an agenda item.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
You want that for next meeting?
That's just, and then the other one was the parking attendant. There was talk about making it from May to September. That too, we will have to change our parking orders and adjust and probably the scope of work for the parking. So, does the board want to do this the next meeting? Or what do you guys want to do? Carol?
On the job description for the harbor master, my vision, which maybe isn't shared by everybody else, was that would be the purpose of the workshop with coastal waters, is that we distribute the job description to everybody. Apparently coastal waters was working on it. He said, stop. That we sit down together and in that meeting come up with the job description, so that it's not an agenda item on a regular select board meeting, other than once we, as a group, agree, we can bring it to the board meeting and, adopt it or something.
So to that, you had also mentioned, well, correct me if I'm wrong, I thought it was you, about getting with Long and probably do it shared. I don't know if it was you or not.
Well, Long has suggested that as a possibility, but I don't think that's for this coming budget year. It was more code enforcement officer, I think they were talking about sharing, more than a harbor master. They have a pretty minimal harbor master position, so I'm not sure that was an option. But all I'm saying is that I thought, rather than, we've been going back and forth with coastal waters since I've been on the board about this, and it seems like we just sat down together and figured it out. Because I feel like their input is necessary before we finalize the scope of the harbor master duties. They have, that's their role in the community, as a board, as a committee.
All right, so we'll put in that request to talk about the harbor master job description at a workshop with coastal waters as soon as they are available. Bob?
Can we ask, Mika, can we ask that you have somebody take the current harbor master job description and shellfish warden job description and put them into a Word document so that we can then do edits and that kind of thing? I believe currently it's just a PDF, it's just a picture of an old job description.
All we have is a PDF.
Can somebody type it in, please?
I can export it into a Word document.
Yeah, we don't
I'll
have-
send it back to you.
For both the harbor master and
Yeah.
shellfish. That'd be great. That would allow us all to collaborate on editing instead of marking up pieces of it.
Okay. Anybody else have comment?
All right, what about the parking ordinance? Mark?
Not sure we should start looking at changing any ordinances until we're sure that we're changing or downsizing positions. But I think looking at positions is the first step. And if you change the position so it goes less, then it may or may not affect an ordinance. So at that point, we take a look at the ordinance.
Well, I understand that, but if we change the position to be less, that will change the ordinance, and the ordinance needs to be changed at town meeting.
No, I thought the parking ordinance was just under the select board.
Parking and traffic is at the will of this body.
I thought ordinance. should be changed at
Those
town
two
meeting.
are different.
That's the only one that this body can address directly through a public discussion for people to hear what we're looking at. That's the only ordinance we have some ability to modify.
Okay, you apologize.
I don't know why that is.
I
Because
thought,
of this.
no, I thought all ordinances had to do with code of town, so I do apologize. Well,
Suggestion, would it make sense to talk about parking in our meeting with coastal waters, given that our parking is at harbors?
It definitely would, in my opinion, if I may, because it directly affects access to the facilities.
We've got two places where we park, both of them are next to the dock. So if we include that in that workshop with coastal waters, I think that helps move in the direction that at least seems to make sense to me.
Yep. Okay, so we'll send an email to Justin and let him know that the board is interested in doing a workshop on the harbor master job description and shellfish,
Yeah.
whatever description, job description, and then the parking. So that way they don't come like, oh, we didn't know what we were talking about.
Yeah, make sure Shellfish gets it too. I'm not sure how interested that committee is in these discussions, but that's.
Not very responsive in my email.
But just make sure they get it.
Yeah, it'd be good to, yeah. Do they all have email?
They're on the website, they don't come back, but I don't know if they get looked at.
All right, anything else? All right, moving on. Executive session pursuant to 1 MRSA 4056C, acquisition of real property and economic development, and take any resulting action to discuss East Shore Drive and South Shore Drive, and 1 MRSA 40568 personnel, and take any resulting action to perform TA annual review.
So moved.